Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being part of today's second Australian Live Day. For those who don't know me yet, I'm Daniel Fuchs and act as Vice President at Joint Forces for Solar and the International Battery and Energy Storage Alliance. It's my sincere pleasure to kick off the micro conference today, and I wish every one of us an insightful session filled with latest solar and energy storage intelligence. Before we start with the conference, please allow me to share some information on the Solar and Storage DigiCon platform and today's logistics. SSDC is the first virtual trade show for the global solar and energy industries that combines an energizing exhibition floor, limitless networking opportunities, and an international knowledge exchange. Since its launch in mid-July this year, SSDC has grown to be the most powerful platform for the global solar and energy storage industries. You can find the major solar and energy storage brands exhibiting their products, innovations, and have the ability to directly communicate with them and other attendees via chat and email. Therefore, please make sure to visit the exhibition hall within the break or right after the conference session today. With our ongoing commitment to fight the climate change all across the globe, we are delighted to let you know that we will consequently continue our operation in 2021. Here we encourage all professionals along the entire value chain to become part of this journey, and we would be delighted to get your feedback on any kind of participation. Regarding today's conference session, you will have the chance to ask your questions in real time in the public chat box right next to the screen where the presentations are running. Our team will compile a selection of questions for each speaker, which I am, as the moderator, happy to raise if time allows. Further to that, our speakers will be also online in the environment. To ask questions in a one-to-one chat, please click on the Now Attending button on the top right, search for the contact's name, and drop a chat inquiry by clicking the balloon marked in green. Enough from my side for now. Let's start with the session and welcome our first expert speaker onto the virtual stage, which is Warwick Johnson, founder of Sunwith. Warwick founded Sunwith in the year 2009 with a mission to grow the solar industry by making solar businesses outstandingly effective. Warwick has gone on to assist over 1,400 solar businesses in Australia and is currently a director also of the Clean Energy Council. His presentation title today is Revealed: What Price to Charge to Maximize Solar Business Profitability. Thank you very much in advance. My pleasure to hand over to Warwick and enjoy his presentation.
Permission to start my video. Can you, there we go. Now, I'm aware that perhaps the auditorium isn't streaming live with what we're doing right now. So I'm going to continue on and hope that there's some technical genius that's working on the back end. And in the meantime, start preparing my presentation with the intent that if you're watching this on recording at the very least, you get to watch the start of it. So let me start that video for you and make sure my notes are all there. Great. So hi, I'm Warwick Johnston from Sunwiz, here with you today. Look, today we're going to reveal the data that's reshaping the solar industry. We've got some valuable insights here based on highly accurate and relevant market data that's going to help solar manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers alike. Look, firstly, I want to speak to the mega trend of what's happening on our planet, and also why I'm wearing a t-shirt with Greta Thunberg on it. Anyone who's watched David Attenborough's Life on Our Planet, and if you haven't watched this documentary, you absolutely must. You'll know that our planet is going through turbulent times, to say the least. And I don't want to spoil the ending of the movie, but solar power is essential for many life forms on our planet, quite possibly including our own. Cool. Now, Australia is leading the way in solar power as well, which is pretty exciting, especially for me, who one day was enviously looking at Germany. This was back in 2005 and seeing what was happening and thinking maybe I should leave Australia. And for a long time, Germany's been the leading country in the world. And it's no longer the case. Now Australia is up there in terms of watts per capita, and has been a top 10 country for absolute watts the whole time as well. And it's largely due to this the rooftop solar as well. And how to say, I feel very fortunate that we haven't been so subject to the whims of government so strongly as have been those industries or countries that have been reliant upon utility scale solar. So go Aussies, let's keep going. And wow, if you look at these charts, what an impressive year we've had here. You can see here that we are about to top at 3 gigawatts when everything is done and dusted. And that's basically a compound annual growth rate of 40% year on year since 2016. This is bloody impressive, I might say. But to address climate change, we need to provide 100% of Australia's current electricity demand with renewable energy, which theoretically rooftop PV could do by 2030 if we keep up this growth. Let me show you this. That kind of like puts us at 3 gigawatts down here. If you keep on growing at 40%, then by 2030, we will have provided all of Australia's current electricity demand. But by that stage, we'll have electrified all our vehicle fleet, and we'll probably be exporting hydrogen rather than LNG. So electricity consumption will be much higher across the nation. So there's still more room to grow and more to do. And I was pretty excited to see, well, can we actually fit this much solar on? And I noted that if we continue at this rate, we will be running out of home rooftops in 2027. We'll have covered them all with about 10 kilowatts of solar each. And so, you know, from then on, it is commercial rooftops, and there's still plenty more of those to do. So that's quite a vision, really. And to be honest, yeah, it's not solely up to the rooftop PV industry to deliver this for Australia. But if you take a step back at the end of this year, have a breath, and you think, wow, what a busy year. I think you're busy now. You ain't seen nothing yet. And to deliver anything near this amount of PV is going to require every solar business to be operating at its peak velocity. And it means zero wastage. This requires that you have the right salespeople, effectively selling the right product to the right people and getting tons of referrals, because those businesses that don't operate at peak effectiveness will be left behind. And we'll show you some examples of that in a moment. Now, SunWiz is applying to this 21st century solar trend, another 21st century trend, and that is leveraging big data and ultimately artificial intelligence to increase the effectiveness and velocity of the solar industry through the businesses that make it up. So I'm about to show you some data from more than 4 dozen businesses that have enabled us to analyse their open solar accounts. That's a software platform that's the most popular in Australia these days. Very rich data set, and we're using that to provide incredible insights for those businesses about how to optimize their operations, as well as where they sit in the market, under the proviso that we uphold their privacy and, of course, their customers. So, of course, we are doing so. It's early days, and here's what we can show you. So here I am plotting for a sample business the profit realized versus the profit proposed for 3 of their salespeople. Now, despite comparable levels of proposal activity, we're talking about between $175,000 and $275,000 in that period. Their leading salesperson is actually converting 3 times as much as their lagging solar salesperson. So if you were running a business and you couldn't stand wastage, what would you do with this mix of people? Now, the right salespeople effectively selling the right product. Looking at the products now. through the data analysis we've been doing, we see a lot of companies aren't focusing on the right products. They spread themselves thin and they overlook the products which could perform best for them. This chart here shows the profit realized in the past period versus the expected profit per prospect in the last 10 days. And that's a combination of the likelihood of buying multiplied by the actual profit if the customer proceeds. Now, the color shows the success rate. This company has an outstanding product in Enphase Longi that they should continue to back. It's performing very well, and it's their top product that they're in terms of their actual profit realized. But there's, of course, it's not the only product that they're offering. And you can see down here that Enphase and LG isn't performing very well for them. And it's because it's got such a low conversion rate. And you can see that if perhaps they switch their attention from Enphase and LG across to Enphase REC, then they could significantly improve their effectiveness and along with it, their revenues and profits. And look, naturally, the products that your company sells best will vary from this, and this is a combination of the customer fit and the business fit and the salesperson fit about which products will sell best. But it's fascinating analysis, and we see many businesses pushing products which aren't actually being successful for them and overlooking others. The right salespeople effectively selling the right product to the right people. Here we're looking at postcodes as proxy for people. We're looking at the profit sold versus the profit proposed. For the postcodes targeted by one anonymous solar retailer who's opted into our Sunbiz Advisor service. We see here their second largest postcode down there on the bottom right there is only converting 1% of those sales, despite being that second largest one that they're proposing into. And there's locations that convert even less down the bottom there. Now, question is, what would happen if instead of concentrating on their sales team in those postcodes, they focused where on the postcodes they're winning 50% of the jobs? What would that do to their business, revenue, profit, and velocity, and ultimately growing of the solar industry? The right salespeople effectively selling the right product to the right people. Now, this chart shows the percentage one for a number of different solar companies on our service versus the price charged. Now, you'd naturally think that high price players would sell less often than low price players, but this chart's showing that that's not always the case. Within the solar industry, there's a range of different business models, and you may hate Euro Solar, for example, but we need almost everyone in the industry to rapidly scale their business in order to address climate change, right? I'm not here to pass judgment on the right business model, but there's always going to be a low price, high volume player in every industry and some boutique companies. And my quest is to deliver those solar businesses the insights, tools, and wisdom to enhance their effectiveness and to grow a high impact business. And I'm thrilled that Andy from RACV Solar, formerly Gippsland, is going to be presenting later, because I think he's in that quadrant there, the high price, high conversion quadrant. What can we learn from these companies that can grow rapidly without having to do so on the basis of price and price alone? It's not boutique, it's brand in my mind. I'd be interested to hear if you agree with those sort of characteristics. But there's also those laggards there, which I mentioned before. We need to convert better, learn how to sell well, etc., or you're going to be left behind. Now, to do all of this, each player needs to concentrate on what they're best at. And here's some fascinating data showing the range of margins that gets applied within the solar industry and the range of outcomes it delivers. And again, it's not necessarily that you have a high margin business that you have low volume. We see some examples out here of a business which has a nice large circle at a high margin and high conversion rate. If you can be that business, that's where you want to be, right? Because you've got cream to both enjoy, but also to drive your business growth. And then there are some businesses that could be doing well, perhaps by adjusting their margins. They might find a higher volume business which delivers them more money at the end of the day. Look, we don't just need to make retailers outstandingly effective. This data here is that we've been showing is starting to feed back into product development initiatives. So for example, if you were to develop an inverter, you'd really want it to be best suited to the local market, and it's going to take years of effort to develop a new inverter. Neither the manufacturer nor the planet can really afford for that effort to be wasted. So if you thought perhaps an 8 kilowatt 3-phase inverter is required in the Australian market, having data to back that hunch may make the difference between a product success and a product failure. And this chart is just showing you the number of inverters that are required for each of those different DC PV kilowatt system sizes, commonly single string or microinverters, but often there are 2 inverters needed. And this one is showing the overdriving of inverters. So if you've got a 5 kilowatt inverter, often it's been overdriven there 1.3 times, but a 10 kilowatt inverter, not so much. And what does that say for your product design? I'm running fast out of time. I wanted to quickly touch on this emerging market as well. 13 kilowatt systems now representing 7% of the volume of residential. I wanted to point to the records that are happening in each state, New South Wales here, and the rebound that's happening in Victoria now that we're out of stage 4 lockdown in Melbourne. I wanted to point out that there are some high growth companies that are just doing some sustained growth and some that are just shooting out of the blocks with some impressive growth there. And all of these are great opportunities for businesses to be partnering with as product suppliers or otherwise. I'll leave it there. Our mission is to grow the solar industry using best practice tools to accelerate solar businesses and make them outstandingly effective. And that's just a sneak peek of what we can do for solar businesses on the Open Solar platform, using our data analytics from a range of different sources. And I'd really invite you to reach out with any questions you have. We've got a history of supporting thousands of businesses now, and look forward to that future ahead.
Thank you so much, Warwick, for this valuable guidance on how to make solar business profitable. Really a huge opportunity there and a lot to do still, but we are exactly on the right track. And as you already mentioned, our next speaker, Andy McCarthy, who is CEO of RICV Solar, will now underline exactly what you have introduced in your first presentation. Andy is the CEO of RICV Solar, a lifelong advocate for renewables. He's regular on the public speaking circuit, playing a key role in developing innovative projects. He continues to push the boundaries on what the future energy grid will look like and realize the economic, employment, and community opportunities that exist within the transition. So it's now my sincere pleasure to hand over to Andy McCarthy, who will present on the topic solar business operations, what makes a solar business valuable. Thank you very much in advance. And Andy, the stage is yours.
Oh, good, Andy. Go ahead, man.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. Okay, we're good to go, Warwick. Just confirm and I'll keep into it.
I can see your screen and your beautiful mug, mate.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity to have a chat today. It's always a pleasure to join Warwick, and I always love your insights, literally your insights, Warwick. It's really important for us to sit outside our own echo chamber in our business sometimes and to understand what's happening more broadly across the industry, because I often find that we just look too inward sometimes and worry about what's happening in our own backyard, but to sit back and think about what's happening within the industry sometimes causes us to make different decisions and much better decisions. So I appreciate having people of your quality in the industry to keep that holistic approach for companies like ours, and it's always very valuable. So love your work, and another presentation that we got great value out of as always. So I will endeavour to follow with a decent slideshow as well. So I was asked to talk about what is it that makes a solar business valuable. This is something that, you know, I think has been the underpinning of Gippsland Solar's growth story through to becoming RACV Solar and being acquired a year ago as of yesterday. I think that we have a story to tell that speaks to our values that we had from day one. If you have a look at the 2010 to 2019 growth story and where we've come from and now where we are, I'm really proud that we've managed to keep our values and our core beliefs intact, and our team that believe in those values as well. So just to paint a bit of a picture of how we got from 2010 and to where we are now. Originally the team of two, my wife Kelly and I, so there wasn't so many HR issues, there was always some, but you know, it was just Kelly and I working out of the third bedroom of our family home in a little town called Murbu North up in Gippsland, a town of about 1,000 people. Our marketing budget consisted of a little $6 ad in the local paper, which was that little here's my card section. So that was all we could afford at the time. And as I said, operating out of the third bedroom of our home. I think the whole business model at that stage was about that you can trust us to look after you, because if we don't do the right thing by you, there's a good chance that we'll see you at the IGA, on a supermarket on Sunday, or our kids will be playing footy together on Saturday. So we were 100% accountable to deliver on what we promised. Every business has its own core values and its own pitch. For us, we really talked to that small town regional Australia value set that we think really cut through with clients. You can't be anonymous. If you promise something, you have to deliver, otherwise you'll be well and truly held accountable. In fact, one of my first electricians ended up leaving the town, and he said, you cannot run a business and live in the same small town. But that was because he never answered his phone, and then people would then hassle him at the supermarket when he was trying to get bread and milk. So I think that's a really good example of what happens if you don't do the right thing. And I think that's a good foundation for a business to grow from. If you fast forward to 2019, when we were acquired by RACV, we were up to a team of 80 plus, over 120 actually, including our subcontracted installers. We had 6 offices right across Victoria and in the CBD. We'd become one of the largest companies in Australia in terms of in-house workforce. And by the end of 2020, we had over 50 meg of rooftop solar installed. We don't tend to focus on volumes. We don't do many projects bigger than, say, 2 megawatt. We do everything from 10 panels for Joe and Mary in Morwell to 1.4 megawatts on the Latrobe Regional Hospital in the Latrobe Valley. But, you know, megawatts of rooftop solar installed is not one of our key strengths. It's more about the reach. You know, we deliver about 1,500 projects a year at the moment. That will accelerate to 2,250 next year. So, you know, we're punching above our weight compared to our humble beginnings. But I do believe that we managed to maintain those values. And the business was really not sure if it would ever be for sale, but when we happened to find a partner that we were aligned in our values, we found that to be quite a seamless integration, where we've been able to benefit from the scale and diversity of RACV and a couple of thousand staff and everything that it represents over the last 117 years of its history, but we didn't have to change our values. So I'm really proud of that. It was never about money for us. It was really about values. And I think when you start with shared values, then everything else just flows really nicely. So really proud of how we've gone, and the fact that 12 months later, our entire team has stayed intact basically after, you know, giving them a new shirt and a new business card and saying, we now work for RACV Solar and here's why it's a great thing. I'm so proud that my team has stayed together and believes in the shared vision. And we're on a remarkable journey at the moment, and there's no end in sight. So just a little bit of an oversight of the Australian solar industry, further to Warwick's points. There's a number of really interesting factors in the Australian sector. The amount of companies installing solar, I think, talks to how fragmented this industry is. And that's been one of my bugbears, is that the smaller companies aren't collaborating widely enough to try and combine their forces and really build each other up. And we've seen some very large players come in and take significant market share, but at the bottom end, I think there's an opportunity for smaller companies to collaborate and work together and stop seeing each other as competitors, but thinking about how we can all help each other to get better and make our industry more respected and credible as well. It's around 700 solar businesses have gone under since 2011. I'm not 100% sure of that number, but that's around about where it is. If you look at how many orphaned systems there are out there installed by a company that's no longer in business, we hear some pretty awful stories from people. They've had a horrible experience. They just desperately need someone to help them. It makes you feel really sad for the way some people have been treated. They know they've made a bad decision in hindsight, but at that stage, it's too late, and we try and help them as best we can without, providing too much liability for ourselves. We always try and help where we can, or at least direct them the right way. It's incredible in Australia, the fact that, all of our key trading partners, maybe apart from India, have a net zero target. All of the state and territories have a net zero target, and the federal government doesn't. I don't have any opinion on that. No, I'm not a political beast, but I think it's quite an anomaly, and it's quite stark. But what that has done, funnily enough, is that uncertainty has caused the wholesale price of electricity to go through the roof, which has then resulted in more solar and wind coming into the market. And now the uncertainty still is causing gaps in the market that is driving the increase in battery storage and other types of firming. So it's kind of funny how the lack of federal support for consistent policy support for renewables has actually driven the uncertainty, which has caused the boom in renewable energy, in my opinion. So it's I think that's it's quite ironic. And I believe that there's a strong distrust by Australian consumers towards the energy retailers, mainly the big ones. There's just a really anti-establishment mindset in Australia, and some retailers do it really well, and others, the net promoter scores are extremely low. But I think that companies like RECV Solar, and I can probably rattle off 20 or 30, I'd be paying a disservice to others to mention names, but there are other companies, I believe, that just have that intrinsic level of trust with the client, and the client just really believes that they will give them the right solution and will look after them should they need any support in the future. So it's a very interesting market, a number of unique drivers. So the way that I believe to build value in the business and how we got to where we are, we often refer to the term braggawatts, which I think is, it really refers to chasing jobs because of you want to have the big fancy logo of that client on your website. It looks fantastic from a drone, like this RECV resort at Torquay. This is not a braggawatt job. This is what we had to do because we're owned by RECV, so it was a great project to deliver. But it's really important not to get sucked into chasing projects just for the prestige of delivering them. One of my old, the most experienced people in the solar industry, Lindsay Hart, told me once that turnover is vanity and profit is sanity. And I think that's a really important message to always bear in mind as this market gets hotter and hotter almost every year. And just to put into perspective, in the last 6 months, if we had 10 opportunities put in front of us, we would only have gone for maybe 3 of them. So we're very focused on what we go for. We know who our clients are. We don't have a subservient kind of relationship where we beg for work, for example, or sell ourselves really heavily. We're looking for partnerships. We believe we bring a lot of value to the client in the way that we can help them with their comms and marketing and awareness of what they're doing. We bring a lot of value in supporting them in the long term. So we always come back to the fact that it's not a vertical relationship with our customers, it's a partnership. So that's why we're quite fussy about the type of work that we take on. It goes without saying that doing the right thing by customers can never be, you can never vary away from that core value. You always have to do the right thing. And imagine if it was my mum, what would I do for her? And treat your customers that way. A lot of businesses, I would say, have probably started with those ideals. And as the pressure of trying to be profitable in a really tough market, they maybe unconsciously lose their way. I believe that we're very self-aware and always very, very focused on coming back to that. What is the right thing to do? Let's just do the right thing by the customer, and everything else from there falls into place. One of my favourite words in this industry is collaboration. I talked about how fragmented the solar sector is. I just collaborate. I also like to hang out with people. I'm very extroverted, but collaboration is just, it's so much fun and it's so good for your business. It's quite interesting if you look on social media or LinkedIn or other forums to see our competitors actually recommending us and saying, you know, if you're going to go with RECV solar, you're in great hands. We will always extend that courtesy to others. It's just the right thing to do, because we have to remember that we have an obligation, of course, to our own businesses, which pay our way and provide the lifestyle that we enjoy. And we always have to do the right thing by our company. But you also need to remember that you have an obligation to the industry, which is an emerging industry and still maturing and finding its credibility, I believe, as a large-scale generator of energy, of low-cost energy and reliable electricity. Just remember that you always have an obligation to raise the bar of the entire sector. So, you know, for me, for example, one informal thing that I try and do is every month I try and do something for the industry that doesn't benefit me, doesn't benefit my business. It might be connecting up a young, aspiring electrical engineer that's just looking for some kind of experience. We just have a full workforce and we couldn't provide an opportunity, but we've used our networks to connect them up with someone that they couldn't just ring, the CEO of an inverter manufacturer, for example, and say, I'd really love for you to give this young person a go because they're really keen. And seeing those opportunities then flourish and knowing that we're not getting a benefit from it, but it's just a good thing to do for the sector. It feels really good. And if we all did something like that every month, I think the industry would benefit as a result. I'm big on making sure that you keep value in your offering. You should always add value rather than cutting margin and cutting price. I've had my sales team ring me countless times in the last 10 or 11 years, just really, you know, frustrated, upset about missing out on a job because someone came in insanely cheap. And I just have to say to them, maintain your margin, be really clear in the value that you provide the client, and don't erode that value, because once you do, you can never get it back. And then you find yourself cutting costs in your service division to support the client, doing other things to compromise the client experience. You know, when a customer says to me, well, I've had a quote from someone else and they are cheaper than you, and I'd say, well, I should hope they would be cheaper than us, because I look at the amount of investment we put into our service department, our operations and maintenance, our response times if there's an issue, the fact that if we install a Fronius inverter and the inverter fails, that we don't bump you off to Fronius and say talk to their service team to try and save a wage or some investment in our business. We want to close the loop around that customer and support them. And in fact, if the manufacturer goes behind our back and takes over that customer experience and compromises in any way, that's one of the non-negotiables for us. We don't cop it. We have cancelled several relationships because they want to control the client experience, and that's not. We don't allow that to happen. We're very fixated on the customer experience. So understand what the value you bring to the client, explain that really clearly, and if they're not prepared to pay for quality solution, you just need to understand they're not your customer, and you've got to be strong enough to walk away and be really clear in what the long-term plan is for your business. And I think that eventually the best companies will rise to the top. And constantly investing in people, technology. For us, it's been investing in our service department, creating a centralized portal where no matter what inverter we install, it's feeding API data into an internal RECV solar monitoring portal. For our commercial jobs, I can look at the wall. Every day there's a screen on the wall that says that, you know, Presbyterian Ladies College today performed at 118% of what we'd estimated it would produce when we did the original performance contracts with the client. And we can scroll through and see hundreds of systems and what their performance has been like every day and overall, in just, you know, a green, red and yellow kind of traffic light scenario to get a really clear snapshot. Those types of investments are really valued by the client, and it allows you to have a point of difference so that you're not playing in the price space, constantly yelling in a noisy market. And just building relationships. You know, for me, I'm absolutely fascinated by LinkedIn. I think not being able to travel this year has been really tough. But every time I have 10 minutes spare, I'm always trawling through LinkedIn, making connections, sending them an email, a LinkedIn message, just opening doors, always opening doors. And there'll be something behind that door. So, you know, I'm in a fortunate position. I'm 38 years old. So I've been in this industry now for 20 years, since I was 18. I'm in a fortunate position where I've had people I always refer to, like Nigel Morris, he's not old, he's experienced. He's one person that took me under the wing and really helped me to cut my teeth and really helped me develop my craft. And I learn and continue to learn from people like Nigel and maybe a dozen others. And I've had younger people coming up. You know, Jake Warner from Penrith Solar Centre is a good example. 10 years younger than me, sent me a message one day and said, Andy, I love everything about your business. I want to be where you are one day. Do you mind if we have a coffee and just talk about how you've got to where you are and what I can do in my business to get better? I just love when someone has the get up and go to reach out to me and ask for that support. I love paying it forward. It's a wonderful thing to do for the industry. It feels good to watch people flourish. He'll then have someone 10 years younger than him contacting him and saying, I love what you've done there, Jake. Can we talk and how I can build my business up? And just paying it forward, and together, this sector will just become more successful, and there'll be more opportunity for everyone. And it will create more jobs. It'll be great for the planet, and will be a tremendous success story in the Australian sector. So that's a little bit about how I perceive value in business. I hope that some of it's landed. I would love to hear from anyone on LinkedIn if they have thoughts they would like to share or ideas. I'm always looking to learn. So by all means, hit me up on LinkedIn and send me a message, and I'd love to continue the discussion.
Thank you very much, Andy, for this insightful and content-driven presentation. Just a quick reminder for all attendees, our speakers for today's sessions will be live in the auditorium as well as in the environment itself. Please make use of the opportunity to connect with them directly through a one-to-one chat. So now it's my pleasure to hand over to our next speaker, which is James Martin, Communications Manager at Switched-In. James has nearly a decade of experience in researching and writing about distributed energy, spanning the retail solar, retail electricity, and energy efficient sectors in the Australian, North American, and UK markets. His pieces have been also referenced by companies, governments, non-governmental organizations around the world. His presentation title you will hear now is Why Solar PV Export Control is Good for Energy End Users. Thank you very much, and my pleasure to hand over to James.
Today. Give me just a moment. And let me find my notes. So yeah, today, thank you everyone for having me. I feel like I'm following a couple of very tough acts. I'm going to sort of narrow in a little bit on a particular opportunity or a set of opportunities that are arising as a result of so much solar being on the grid in Australia. So I work for a company called Switched-In, who are a tech startup based in Newcastle, New South Wales. And yeah, today going to talk about why solar export management is good for solar system owners. This is a bit counterintuitive, as I think a lot of people picture, you know, as Andy pointed out, there's really like a lot of pride in, you know, solar in Australia means energy independence to a large degree. And that's what people think of. You know, it's producing energy for yourself. But I guess our perspective as a company is about this picture that these new solar homes, people have batteries or have different sorts of assets coming onto the grid, have a big role to play in actually contributing to the electricity system in different ways as well. So Switched-In, we bridge the gaps between energy companies, equipment manufacturers, and energy end users. We integrate and organize the world's energy resources to create a cleaner, smarter electricity system. This is an overview of what we, how we connect, I guess. So we're enabling partnerships and new functions with network companies and electricity retailers by working with manufacturers and installers to enhance their product offerings and enabling new capabilities. This is an overview of kind of the vision. Today I'm talking about solar, but really we see opportunities in everything, and our mission is to connect everything of value, you know, and working both on the distribution network infrastructure level as well as on the electricity market level. We've got a little droplet that connects with a bunch of different, at this point, inverter and battery brands to provide communications, connectivity, and control to enable those sorts of partnerships that I was mentioning before. The droplets connect securely up into a cloud platform called Storm Cloud, which enables, could be anybody really. It could be a retailer, it could be a solar installer doing fleet management, it could be a network, a distribution network, or one of the integrated utilities like Horizon Power out in Western Australia to basically manage assets, all these distributed assets on the grid. We're working with lots of different companies across the sector, really talking about, a bunch of utilities there, the network operators, retailers. We've got integrations with lots of different devices and also integrations with platform vendors as well. And we're working with them all over the place. So I'm going to talk about two things today. One is about the opportunity in managing physical network constraints, which means a distribution network. I guess the issue here, that's the flip side of the really good story of having lots and lots of solar on the grid, is that the response by some network operators is to basically put a cap on export for solar systems if there's too many of them around. So you may be able to install solar, but you might not be able to put any of your solar energy into the grid because of certain parameters that they need operationally. This is a really blunt solution that's been implemented. So this is the first thing I'll get into in a second. And the second one is about negative spot market pricing, which is the market side of things and a result of not only lots of solar on the grid, but other factors like I guess it comes along with more and more renewables being connected to the grid. So anyhow, South Australia, I'm going to highlight, even though Queensland actually has a bit more solar. So 38% of the homes in Australia in South Australia already have solar on the roof. As Warwick was pointing out, we're headed even higher after that. And there's this sort of nominal 40% threshold that you get to where you start, the network operators end up running into power quality, voltage issues, reverse power flows, which they need to manage once you start hitting that 40% threshold. South Australia is particularly exposed because they don't have any large loads or big generators there anymore. There's lots of solar, lots of wind, bit of gas, and some other things on there. So it's a unique situation that's resulted in a lot of volatility. So here's the issue. You could have new solar systems going in with export limits, which could be zero solar export if the network gets really strict, or they might up it to something like 1.5 kilowatts, where basically what you're doing, you're hamstringing your solar system. So it's only used, the energy you're generating is only used for self-consumption. You can use it for yourself, but you can't put much into the grid, or you can't put any in the grid in some instances. And that's happening in networks around the country as a result of lots and lots of solar, and also some of just the inherent nature of some of these grids, especially in the regional areas. So the approach that's being floated, in which South Australia is going to be bringing in, is this idea of a dynamic export limit, where instead of doing that to all the new solar homes that go in, they basically say, all right, you can install this much of a system on this size system on this agreement. You get to export most of the time, but there's going to be certain times of year or certain periods during certain seasons, especially autumn and spring, when there's lots of solar energy but very little load, where your solar might be curtailed. And that's the alternative. That's an alternative to just having a zero or very low export limit. So we have an in-house analyst who's put together some figures on this, and I won't get too much into the details. If you're interested, you can hop onto our website and sign up for our newsletter, and we'll be publishing more detail, but I'm aware I've only got 15 minutes, so I'm trying to keep it light. But basically, on the left here, this is imagining there were 30,000 new systems installed in South Australia last year. If, all of those systems had been export limited, which we're not at that point yet, down to 0 kilowatt hours to 0 kilowatts, which means only solar self-consumption, per home, you're looking at a loss of, greater than 7 megawatt hours per year, which also means lost feed-in tariff revenues for that home. All up, if they were all zero exported, which could happen in the future without management of these systems, you're looking at up to 200 gigawatt hours curtailed annually, which is pretty crazy. Like, our goal is to make sure that more solar can get connected to the grid, more people can take advantage of solar. But this would be approximately 2% of South Australia's annual electricity demand. And that's just 1 year's worth of newly installed systems. So look, we've done some modeling. The actual modeling from networks may end up being different, but you can see this is loss of feed-in tariff income on 0 export or 1.5 kilowatt static export on the left for an individual home. Whereas on the right, if you tie this to minimum demand in the state, your export and put a dynamic limit on there, your curtailment levels are going to be much, much lower. This is just indicative to give an idea of where things could go with this. But anyway, look, on a 12-cent feed-in tariff, you're looking at a reduction in the lost feed-in tariff revenues to under $200 a year versus more than $800 a year. Again, indicative and modeling, and look at our assumptions when we get the details out. But this is just an indication of where things are headed. We're involved in this arena-backed project called Flexible Exports with South Australia Power Networks and AusNet Services, who are in Victoria, and a few inverter manufacturers that is basically building the infrastructure to test out how this might work in reality. So, and then post that one, we'll hop on to the next opportunity, which is really about these new market dynamics that come out of the price volatility. So this may only be a short-term problem, but right now in South Australia, you end up with negative spot prices for a surprisingly big portion of the year. So this is, again, as I mentioned before, not necessarily a direct impact of just lots of solar on the grid, but it's this combination of, lots of solar, lots of wind, and low load. And you've got certain generators. It's quite technical, but basically you have certain generators who will pay to continue generating even when there's no demand, because they want to be prepared for something, put in very, very rough terms. So there's more and more negative spot price intervals state by state, but if we narrow in or zoom in on South Australia, they're particularly stark. So you have some incidents of negative spot market prices where that last 15 hours. And I'll get into the implications of this in a second. So that's a really long time for negative spot market prices. They're happening again often. You can see on the right there, that's 2020, but September, October, again, spring, low loads, lots of solar energy production. It's the incidences of negative prices are happening more and more. So in the past 12 months, there were 672 hours of negative price intervals, which is the equivalent of like 28 full days, or I guess if you looked only at sunshine hours, that's about 2 months with a full day with the solar generation, which is crazy. So what happens when the spot market goes negative is the generators who are making energy, putting energy into the grid, actually have to pay for that. So that's like, whether you're a solar farm or you have rooftop solar, that solar energy is going into the grid. And in that case, it's your retailer who's paying you to produce that energy 2 times over. And I'll get into that into a second. So you get generators dispatched Every 5-minute interval, the generators pay to dispatch that energy into the grid. The retailers are taking that on. They're also paying your feed-in tariff, which is crazy. They'd actually be making money if you were consuming energy during these negative spot market intervals. It's a bit of a mind warp to get your head around. Whereas for residential customers, there's no particular exposure, right? Your retailer cushions you from that by giving you set feed-in tariff prices, well, most of them anyway, set feed-in tariff prices and set electricity prices throughout the day. So as an end user with solar, you're not going to feel that, which means there's actually this opportunity for aggregators or electricity retailers to partner with businesses and homes who have rooftop solar to find value in that. So the retailer is losing money on the wholesale spot market price potentially. They're also losing money by paying you your feed-in tariff. Is there something they can do about that? And we kind of, again, I'm not getting into the details, all the different situations modeled, but kind of let's narrow in on an average or typical household with 6 kilowatts of solar on the roof, using 10 kilowatt hours a day, which is a bit on the low side. So they're exporting about 80% of their energy. There's, again, take this kind of loosely with a 12-cent feed-in tariff. The change in household costs, if you turn off the solar during those negative spot market events, is about $158. The changes in the retailer costs avoided costs are about $270 a year in total, avoided feed-in tariff payments because the solar is not going into the grid. And also the avoided negative spot market price exposure because that solar energy isn't being fed into the grid. Bit convoluted, but basically there's $112 opportunity in that, right? To say if the retailer or whoever it is shuts off your solar for those periods, there's a potential to save them $112, which could be shared with the end users. Now, most people are not going to like this idea, understandably. You don't really want to be shutting off solar. It seems counterintuitive, especially for market reasons. And here's an idea of what it would look like. And these are actual days where the red line is negative spot market prices, and assuming curtailment during those negative spot market events. This is like 3 days in a row where there are negative spot market prices. So I think you might look at this as like a stepping stone towards something bigger, where you don't want to be shutting off people's solar really, but there's some sort of value opportunity in here, and it could be a stepping stone or a new type of opportunity until you get loads or batteries or electric vehicles who can soak up those negative prices and create an overall new market dynamic. So look, we see a lot of opportunities in that, and this would be kind of one lever that could come out of it. The goal at the end of the day is to maximize value for all the grid users. That's everybody, the solar customers and the others. Never mind the retailers, electricity networks, and everybody else. New models of engagement and careful deployment of this strategy can unlock other opportunities through virtual power plants, battery storage, EVs, and key loads. But you've got to make sure you've got the right technology in place to unlock all these opportunities. Look, I moved some of the other stuff about us to the beginning. That's it. If you want to give us a shout, we're on all social media platforms. And yeah, that's my email down there, or feel free to ask some questions in the comments. I'm sure there will probably be some. Thanks.
Thank you very much, James, for the great presentation. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to our next speaker, which is Ivane Smallberger, Business Developer Australia at Socomec. Ivane is a Business Development Manager in the Electrical Power Switching and Monitoring segment, representing Socomec Group with a career spanning a decade and placements in Africa, Europe, and now Asia, his focus lies on making photovoltaic systems and energy storage systems safe, efficient, more reliable for all stakeholders. His presentation title is Safe and Efficient Power for PV and ESS Application, Switchgear and Monitoring Overview. My pleasure to hand over now to Ivane. Yes,
I can hear you clearly.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. As mentioned, my name is Ivani Smallberger. I am a business development manager for the Socomet Group. And today we've had a lot of discussions about the high-level picture of photovoltaics and energy storage and what this means for ROI and investments in the future. But really, I want to bring it back to the fundamental concern which we are looking at in the Socomet Group, which is how do we ensure safe and efficient power for these systems. So just a quick overview of Socomet Group and who we are. We are a company that was established in 1992. It's an international group, but we still have the culture and values of a family-owned company. We have over 3,500 employees, of which we have a subsidiary in Australia with roughly 20 people. And our yearly turnover is close to 600 million euro. But we really are specialists in safety, control, availability, continuity, quality, and efficiency of low voltage installations. So with that being said, I really want to focus today in Solar and Storage DigiCon for Australia on how we manage energy storage and photovoltaic systems in Australia. So the first one I want to talk about is switchgear and monitoring systems for high density batteries. So this goes into detail about the challenges posed by high prospective short circuit currents in ESS. Addressing something that I like to refer to as PPP, which is the protection of people, property, and payback. And then moving into a second level, which is switchgear requirements for photovoltaic installations that are specific to the Australian market. So here, touching on localized component requirements for Australian applications. And again, looking at the PPP, which is protecting our people, our property, and the payback of our system. So firstly, when we look at the context of energy storage is still a key to the renewable energy transition. But when we look at it one step deeper, there are a lot of technological challenges. The first one is the high power density batteries and the additional requirements it puts on the electrical system and the infrastructure. Typical challenges that you would have as an OEM, an EPC, or even a system integrator of ESS is to protect the system, the people, your payback, optimizing your maintenance, and also ensuring that you comply with standards, whether it's IEC, UL, or even more specific in terms of AS, NZS standards. So when we look at a typical energy storage architecture, which I will use for today's purpose, I will look at battery racks feeding into a battery connection panel or BCP, one step higher into my PCS, my power conversion system, and then back into my grid. So typical AC coupled system, just to make it very simple. Now to make my point, when we take cells and we integrate these cells into a rack together with a BMS system, one rack could potentially have a prospective short circuit current of up to 10,000 ampere, which is high, but it's not something unseen in a distribution board in a residential application. But then when we start putting more and more racks together, as an example, 16 racks, we have a short circuit ratings of up to 100,000 ampere. This makes it tricky to be able to prevent battery failure modes and catastrophic events like fire. I know most of you could be aware of the early days of storage in Korea, where there were many catastrophic failures. And how do we address this? So what drives a catastrophic failure in batteries? Firstly, is an internal event. So this could be something like a short circuit of the cell. Secondly, it could be an external abuse. So this is physical external disturbance to the actual component or the cell itself. When these events happen, it could lead to thermal runaway, firstly, which is the initiation of the fault. And secondly, the propagation, which leads to the catastrophic event or the fire. Now, if you take into consideration what I mentioned earlier, and you look at 1 rack or even 16 racks, at the point of either of these failures, when we start in the thermal runaway condition, the short circuit indication could be very close to instantaneous, very short time period where it reaches its maximum discharge. And our system needs to manage this electrical power to be able to ensure that the energy can be maintained. So how do we find a solution to prevent failure modes? There are 3 options. The first one is overcurrent protection. The second one is overvoltage protection. And finally is thermal management. For the purpose of today's presentation, we will focus on overcurrent protection. So I'm not going to cover energetic failures, which needs gas detection, fire detection, or extinction. So in overcurrent protection, protecting and isolating ESS systems is particularly difficult because of the fault conditions that is caused by the battery characteristics and also the circuit time constants in DC. So under a short circuit condition, a high time constant in the circuit can result in a slower rise in fault current, which means that the protection systems would operate slower, forcing the system to store a lot more energy in the circuit. Now, obviously, there's a limitation as to how much energy can be absorbed in the circuit. And also, as the time constant increases, the voltage capability of my protection device decreases. So it is essential for us to select switch disconnection and fuse combinations in our system that would be able to withstand and clear faults safely. So how do we do that? How do we start thinking about component selection to ensure this safe disconnection and isolation? I will look specifically at the areas where we would have protection devices. So firstly, number 1 is predict. So we need to be able to predict the system characteristics, the prospective short circuit currents of my system, and the time constants of my system. After predict, we have protect. Protect means we select the right fusing or protection systems, following the standards where it says fuses need to be placed at points where there is a change in cross-section of the conductor or current carrying capacity of the conductor. And finally, disconnect. So choosing the right disconnection device or isolation device, every circuit shall be capable of being isolated from live conductors and from each other. So when we've done these 3, it is important for us to validate our selection. So to ensure PPP, so protection of people, property, and our payback, we need to take this combination and we need to do one of 2 things. Use a specific selection, software and modeling to ensure that the switch and the fuse can withstand the system short circuit as an entirety. Or secondly, to be able to test the system using an independently certified laboratory. In Socomec's case, we have services to provide both the simulation of the selection software as well as the testing. So this means that Socomec provides energy storage components for safe isolation and monitoring. In AC, so when we start on the AC level, we have AC switching and isolation, both manual and motorized, up to 1000 volt AC, with highly reliable and maintainable designs, which have been in the market for over 20 years in this current design. Secondly, moving to the DC on the PCS system and the battery connection panels, we have manual and remote motorized switches up to 1,500 volt DC in on-load and off-load switching configurations. When we get to power quality management, we have a system of power quality measurement and monitoring, which will allow you to perform some basic system evaluations on performance, and as well go into more finer detail about monitoring the power quality of your system on both AC and DC. Finally, on the battery rack level, we have some very innovative ways of switching 1,500 volt DC circuits safely by using the Inosys system, which is a product that is 2-pole compact switches with visible contacts for maximum safety. So I would like to also address the same topic which touches the DigiCon today, and that is photovoltaic systems. So moving to photovoltaic systems, the context again is photovoltaics for us is still the cornerstone of renewable energy. But one step down is the fact that Australian regulators call for the highest level of safety in photovoltaic components and systems, which we do not see in the IEC world. And again, the main challenges we see is protecting our people, property and payback, but then also complying to the local standards of AS, NZS, which I will touch on now. When we focus on combiner boxes, a combiner box in the system on the left, so we have our PV strings, which feed into a combiner box and then goes to my PV inverter. The combiner box, just as a quick overview for those who are not familiar, it brings together the outputs of several strings into one box where we provide fusing to protect the cables and the PV modules from fault current, and also provide isolation, emergency disconnection, and functional switching for this part of the system. When we look at the Australian standards, there are two very specific ones we should look at. So AS NZS 60947 Part 3, which defines performance required for photovoltaic switches. And then the AS NZS 5033, so the installation standards, which refer to earthing and DC isolation requirements for PV arrays. So firstly, when we look at Annex ZZ, which is AS NZS 60947 Part 3, this calls for photovoltaic switching. That if we look in the IEC world, you can have a photovoltaic switch which has a utilization category of DC 21B. It needs to switch 1.5 times its nominal current, which means that if I have a 400 amp switch, I need to be able to prove the product can work at 600 amp. However, in Australia, there is a requirement for DC PV2 utilization category driven by the standard, which requires 4 times or 400% of nominal current making and breaking operations. So this means if you want to have the right product for Australia, even though it only gets used at 400 amp, you need to prove that you can switch 1,600 amp in this device. Secondly, in terms of operational performance, similarly, IEC DC21 requirements is 1,000 operations with the Australian requirement 5,000. When we look at the installation standards, there are 3 specific configurations which require additional maximum array voltage requirements over and above the IEC standards. So when you have an array that is functionally earthed via a high resistance feeding an isolated inverter, the voltage rating of each switch pole should be at least the maximum array voltage, meaning that typically in IEC, if you have a 1,500 volt system, you would have 750 volt on the negative polarity, 750 on the positive polarity, which will allow you to switch the system of 1,500. However, in the Australian standard, under this specific configuration and the 2 mentioned below, you need to switch 1,500 volt DC on each polarity for a total of 3,000, preventing scenarios like double earth faults, which could lead to fire in cases where it's an extreme one. So again, the Australian standards are really strict, and they are one level above the IEC standards when it comes to safety in photovoltaics. In the Socomec range, again, we have very specific products. So I refer to the Inusys 4-pole products, which have been specifically designed to comply to the AS/NZS requirements. And if you have a standard product, it will not be accepted by the regulators in Australia. The rest of the range is the same as the energy storage from the DC combiner boxes upwards. So to summarize, really, I want to emphasize those three things to ensure the PPP, which is the payback, protection of property and protection of people. We need to be able to predict what our requirement is in the system, protect in terms of electrical requirements, disconnect in terms of isolation, and prediction, protection, and disconnection can be done by using products from Socomec. So please have a full look at our range in terms of switching, protection, and monitoring products on our website. And please do get in contact with me or our Australian subsidiary to support you to ensure that you can protect your people, your property, and your payback in your ESS and photovoltaics.
Thank you very much, Ivane, for the great presentation. As you all have seen, now we are getting more and more into the technical space, and it's my sincere pleasure to welcome our next speaker onto the virtual stage, who is Andrew Gilhooly, Head of Trina Pro APAC region at Trina Solar. Trina Solar is also a founding partner, a valued one of the Solar and Storage DigiCon, same as Socomec. So please make sure you visit their booth in the aftermath of the session and yeah, see what product innovations these companies have in stock for you. A few words about Andrew. He's an accomplished energy and product management professional with over a decade experience within European and Australian solar PV sectors across a variety of disciplines, including B2B, B2C business development, project management, system design, EPC contract negotiation, cost estimation, NPI, and operational maintenance. He's a named inventor on many patents and has an exceptional comprehension of technical, political, and competitive landscape of the ASEAN Australian energy market. His presentation title for today is Integrating Large Format Modules onto Single Axis Trackers, the challenges involved and opportunities to lower CAPEX, LCOE, and risk. Thank you very much in advance. Handing over to Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Great, thank you. And thank you to our friends at EUPD Research for the opportunity to present today. So as Daniel mentioned, you know, there's been a lot of modules hit the market. There's been a wave of these large form factor, high wattage modules come onto the market over the past year. And really, as a result of that, we've seen a lot of innovation in the market in terms of how we can best integrate those and understand how these larger modules are going to work in terms of being installed onto single axis trackers. Thank you to everybody for joining today, and I hope I have some interesting material for you. So really, it's the name of the game is it's changing really from minimizing capex. The large-scale industry, solar industry, is maturing in many markets globally, and it's really shifting towards becoming focused on reducing LCOE. As we see in the top left here, we see a sort of regular decline year on year of LCOE. First in the green line from fixed tilt or fixed structure. And then secondly, in the blue line from single axis tracking. We can see single axis tracking now regularly beating fixed structure in terms of LCOE, and some precipitous declines in LCOE in all major global markets that you see in the top right there. Just some headlines from the trade press over the past few months, including 2 Indian rupees per kilowatt hour from a few weeks ago. That's $27 per megawatt hour. Pretty staggering reduction of 15% just in the past 5 months alone in India. And on the bottom right here, we're seeing LCOE for solar in Australia now as low as 40 Australian dollars per megawatt hour. So very staggering declines globally. But what we're seeing is some challenges in big Australian solar, right? And I'm sure many people on the call are familiar with these. I won't go through the headlines in detail, but generally there's been a shift in risk appetite from the EPCs, and those EPCs beginning to transfer that risk back onto the developers, becoming more averse, not taking on connection risk and as much as they were, and so forth. And what we're seeing manifest now in the industry is, on top of that, is as what happened in the wind industry probably 10 or 15 years ago, a lot of the low-hanging fruit in terms of easy sites now becoming depleted. So certainly on the sites that we're being asked to design for our clients at Trina Pro and Trina Tracker, is sites becoming more challenging in terms of a number of factors really. But firstly, we're seeing sites becoming more constrained. Especially when we're considering sites that are co-locating with energy storage and all going towards driving a larger DC capacity, and therefore making the land at a premium. Excuse me for a moment. Okay. And then we're seeing sites becoming more challenging in terms of geotechnical. So we, previously tracking was deemed only to be viable in sites that had, sort of complementary geotechnical characteristics. Now we're seeing sites going ahead on sites that are increasingly rocky or more prone to expansion and contraction and so forth. Similarly, we're seeing sites, previously sites used to be pancake flat to be deemed viable for tracking. Now we're seeing many sites going ahead on sites that are highly variable in terms of the terrain, especially over in Asia Pacific, where in some markets where land is at a premium and high population densities and so forth. Also sites prone to flood inundation. Trina supplied the modules to the Valdora project up in the Sunshine Coast in Australia, which is on a floodplain, so has to be elevated above the flood inundation. Also, as the mining industry sentiment towards renewables grows, we're seeing many of these large sites now becoming incredibly remote at some of these really remote and off-grid mining sites. And then also, as I'm sure we're all aware, the challenges that coronavirus has posed to the industry in terms of supply chain disruptions and so forth. Now, these are the challenges. So we obviously weigh these up against the opportunities in the industry. And we can see a few charts here, a few headlines again, and then a chart from Rystad. There's a huge opportunity that remains in Australia, even though, there's been sort of many gigawatts already installed, a huge pipeline still remains. Now, in order to unlock that pipeline, the key is to continue to innovate on the technological perspective and enable the tracking solutions to become and continue to remain viable as these sites become more and more challenging. What we see in the bottom right corner here is a study that I looked at comparing Australia to Peninsular Malaysia, where we recently quoted about 0.5 gigawatt as part of the large scale solar 4 tender round there. And what we found in Australia, no surprise really, you know, there's no real shortage of land. So the cost of land is relatively smaller in the project financials. So we see all that going towards a tracking at a lower ground coverage ratio, between 30 to 35% for optimum financials, obviously maximizing the yield at these lower ground coverage ratios. Now, when we contrast it to Malaysia, the cost of land is very high, purely because there's not much free land available. And so conversely, when you plug the cost of the land into the economics, it goes towards a much higher ground coverage ratio, where the rows are much more tightly packed at a 50% ratio. So yeah, what we say about Australia really is, you know, as we're considering large scale solar in Australia, there's a driver to use as much land as possible and maximize the yield. But obviously, as you do that and use more land, then your construction risk increases accordingly. So what we're seeing in the module perspective that I alluded to earlier, you know, there's been a real arms race in the industry, basically over the past year, especially as manufacturers have migrated to larger wafer sizes. And Trina was really the first mover earlier this year, going to 500 watts. And then we saw other companies coming out with 530, 540 watts. Trina then moved to 550 watt earlier this year. And next year we'll have our 600 watt. And then sometime after that, our 660, which is what you see on the chart here. So really what that means in a tracker perspective is what you see on the slide here. It brings with it a number of design challenges. So obviously, as the modules get higher in wattage, the panel length tends to increase. So that increases what we call the cord length here that I'm highlighting. And obviously, as the trackers have to get higher off the ground to avoid the modules colliding with the ground, there's basically a non-linear increase in wind load. So we have to be really rigorous in how we ensure that the structure is engineered accordingly to take that much higher wind load. Similarly, you know, string length in the industry going from 1,000 volt to 1,500, the string lengths have increased markedly. And with the Trina modules, we use the M12 210 millimeter wafer. So even though the module wattage is around 550 or 600, there's fewer cells connecting electrically within those modules. So the voltage is actually quite low, in the high 30s or low 40 open circuit voltage. So we're actually running strings up to 40 modules per string on our trackers now. And what that means is the north-south length of the tracker increases, and that increases the propensity of the tracker structure to second order dynamic effects such as torsional galloping and so forth. So these are all of the sort of considerations that's going into it. Now we recently launched our Trina tracker range here, which are a couple of different products under this Trina tracker platform. I'll just go through them very briefly, but the one we're seeing offering the most value in high labor cost markets like Australia is our Vanguard tracker. That's where the modules are a 2-in portrait, as you see here. It's been specifically engineered and validated in wind tunnel testing for these larger format modules. As I say, we're going up to 120 modules per tracker, either 4 strings of 30 or 3 strings of 40, optimized for this low open circuit voltage. They're what we call single rows, so individual row actuation on the motors. That really enables us to vary the tracking angle on an individual row basis and maximize the yield boost from the bifacial modules that we use on the trackers. Also, because we don't have any of these mechanical link arms going from east to west, it really offers completely unimpeded trafficability between the rows during construction and O&M for things like cutting vegetation and so forth. They're also a bit higher off the ground, so we see a bit of a boost in terms of the bifacial performance because the trackers are, as I say, higher off the ground and more widely spaced. So more of that diffuse irradiance can get in and around and on the underside of the modules. We see we've engineered in a industry leading slope tolerance of up to 30% or 15% is standard for using spherical split bearings in the bearing caps. Because we put more modules over the pivot, 2 rows instead of 1, we really amortize the steelwork tonnage and really minimize the pile count. So there's really only 7 piles per table for both the inner or the outer structures. So we're getting down as low as 120 piles per megawatt DC now, whereas other tracker solutions are up in excess of 300 to 400 piles. So really minimizing your geotechnical risk there. Now, if we go on to the next tracker type, is what we call our agile. That's a 1 in portrait solution rather than 2 modules. Again, we've engineered it to go up to 40 modules in a string. But this is what we call a dual row tracker. So if you can imagine, 1 row is motorized, and then that is linked only to 1 adjacent row. There's a few benefits there, but again, that enables us to vary the tracking angle on an individual 2-row basis to maximize the bifacial yield performance. But it also enables unimpeded vehicle access between every other row, which facilitates easier O&M. And I guess the other benefit in O&M is through only motorizing every other row, it reduces your number of motors by 50% or more. So it enables the supply pricing to be very competitive and also leads to fewer potential points of failure in service. Not just fewer motors, but 50% fewer tracker controllers, 50% fewer battery units for the self-power units and so forth. As I mentioned, we've had to rigorously engineer the trackers from a wind perspective. And obviously, the longer the modules get, and especially in the 2 portrait configuration, increasing that cord length up to in excess of 4 meters, and then the trackers getting longer north to south, we've had to partner with a world-renowned wind consultancy, RWDI Animos. And part of that wind tunnel testing has validated our approach here, where historically, most trackers, and especially the first wave of 2 portrait trackers to market, they only use a central point of drive on the tracker, which meant that each end of the tracker north to south was basically unsupported and really increased the propensity for dynamic effects like galloping and so forth. What we've done is go to keep the central drive, but then we use linear actuators as sort of master-slave arrangement. So we're using linear actuators at both ends now as well. So that works to markedly increase the tracker stiffness north to south and really stiffen up the structure and iron out all of these dynamic effects that have been a bit of a challenge for the industry in general. Now we've got a side-by-side just of the Trina 5, we've said 590 watts rather than 600, just to be conservative, against a competitor 520. So you can see the 600s are actually no longer than the competitor 520s. We've just added another column of cells, so they're considerably wider, so 1.3 meters instead of 1.1. But what I've done here is highlight all of the drivers for potential cost saving on the trackers. So we can see the competitor 520 and the Trina 590. The cell technology itself is quite similar. So we can see an identical power density, 208 watts per square meter. And that it's really the power density that drives the relative tonnage of steelwork in the tracker. But everything else that I've highlighted in yellow, we can see here, 41 volts instead of almost 49 with the competitor module that uses a smaller wafer. Conservatively, we've also modeled only 32 modules in the string here. We could probably go up to 36 and 40 with the 550. And similarly here, we can see the total number of piles per megawatt down as low as 124 compared to 137 here. So basically, when you plug all these savings together, it goes towards a construction capex saving of in excess of 1 US cent per watt peak. And this is just a waterfall chart of the construction savings here using typical Australian productivity and typical Australian piling costs and so forth, 50-50 pre-drill and direct driving on the piles and so forth. We can see, a big saving on the pile metal because we're fewer piles per megawatt. Really a quite considerable saving on the electrical balancer system because we're able to run many more strings, I should rephrase it. There's considerably fewer strings per megawatt with the large wafer modules from Trina. So commensurately, there's fewer home run cables to install. There's less DC trenching. There's fewer combiner boxes to install and procure and so forth. And then there's fewer piles and modules to physically install as well. It's not just about CapEx. We're also engaging or employing artificial intelligence, machine learning on our tracker algorithms. So for sites with uneven topography, we can vary the tracking angle at the start and the end of the day to completely eliminate near shading between adjacent tracker rows. And for heavy cloud cover events, it's actually beneficial to put bifacial modules into a horizontal position and really maximize the access to the diffuser radiance on the underside. So we employ that functionality in the algorithm, and we have third-party validation now that both of these effects together can contribute as much as an additional 3 to 8% over conventional bifacial and single-axis tracking solutions. Trina was recently announced as for the 5th year in a row as the joint most bankable brand within the entire solar industry. And we recently relisted on the stock market over in China earlier in the year. And we've really got that big brother of Trina standing behind the tracker technology so that it really offers unrivaled bankability and single point accountability for both the module and the tracker. And then we're here to support our partners at every step of the project lifecycle. So we provide pre-sales engineering support. We can review topography and geotechnical reports and so forth. We parachute in subject matter experts to site during construction and commissioning. And then, as I mentioned, single point accountability in O&M and after sales because Trina provide both the module and the tracker. And we'll just conclude now just looking at some of our projects we've done worldwide. This is the Huanghe project in China, over 600 megawatts with State Power Investment Corp. That's the two portrait tracker. 103 megawatts on the Grasshopper project in the States. We can see here the very forgiving slope tolerance, easily accommodating these slopes on the site. 190 megawatts again with the two portrait in Spain, really showing the unimpeded access between the rows there. And we also deployed 120 megawatts of our multi-row tracker in cyclonic region C in Queensland a couple of years ago, and are about to finish up on a 6 megawatt behind the meter in regional Victoria also. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Here's my email address, so please feel free to reach out with any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Great presentation, very content-driven and good insights on a new technology and sizes. Now it's my pleasure to hand over to our concluding speaker for the solar session today, who is Stéphane Dufresne, Global Senior Director, Customer Services and Product Management at AP Systems. With more than 20 years of international experience across Asia, USA, and Europe in the semiconductor and solar industries, Stéphane had various executive roles from Director of Operations in Philips Semiconductors to Technical Director and General Manager at Upsolar. He joined AP Systems in 2018 and is there as the Product Management and Customer Service Senior Director worldwide. His presentation title for today is Widening the Horizons of Residential and Commercial Solar. Stéphane, the stage is yours. Thank you very much.
Let me share my screen. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes, we can see it perfectly.
All right. So as Daniel introduced, let me speak more about AP systems and how our solution can help you out to further optimize the commercial and residential project you may have. So a few words about the company first. So we were founded in the Silicon Valley in 2009 and started operating in 2010. So 2020, even though kind of a weird year for everybody, was our 10 years anniversary, which is always a nice milestone in any company, and especially in solar with such a dynamic landscape. And who is AP Systems? So we are a global provider of MLPE, module level power electronics equipment and solution for the PV industry, with 2 R&D centers, one in the Silicon Valley in the US and the other one in China. After 10 years, we have now a worldwide footprint with business units and offices, of course, in Australia, in Sydney, in the USA, with 2 offices on the West Coast, Seattle and San Francisco, in Europe, in France and then the Netherlands, China with 2 locations. Here you see our manufacturing facilities on the picture in Jiaxing, which is a 2-hour drive in the south of Shanghai, and in Latin America with office in Mexico and Canada. So what defines a company? So the key of the AP system, which is really in our DNA, is innovation. So if you look later on our product portfolio, we are definitely the widest multi-modules microinverters offering with duo, so 1 micro for 2 modules, a quad, 1 micro for 4 modules, single phase or 3 phase. So it's really a unique offering in the solar marketplace as we speak. One of the key points characterizing the company is bankability. So the company has been profitable since 2012, so only 2 years after inception, which is quite an achievement. And our major investors come from the industry. So they really have a long-term vision, and that's really characterize the approach we have on the market. Our product reliable, they are designed and tested for more than 25 years life, and our micro reliability is hitting the bar for more than failing rate is less than 0.05%. Proven after 10 years, we have now more than 100,000 installations worldwide, and we're serving customers in more than 100 countries as well. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, we have teams dedicated all across the globe to be really close to our customers. And basically in AP system, we really created a complete ecosystem in the MLPE, module level power electronics sphere, with the widest offering worldwide, not only in macros, but also in RSD, rapid shutdown, optimizers. And it's not mentioned here because we are in the finish line of the development phase in the ESS arena with our own storage solution coming soon next year. Here are a few icons to remember as a snapshot of what I just explained. So founded in 2009, a lot of installation. I just want to emphasize on the last bullet, innovation, which is definitely the DNA of the company, with, as of today, more than 100 plus patents listed and available. So in a nutshell, what are the advantages of the AP system solution? And today I will focus primarily on the microinverters. So we've listed them in 6 categories, and the first one I want to talk about is safety. So basically, if you build an installation with a string, all the modules are set up in series, and the voltage accumulates, and you can reach up to 600 volts, sometimes 1000 volts in series in a DC mode, which is highly dangerous, as you say, not only for the installer, but for the fireman. With the microinverters, you don't have these issues, so safety is definitely one of the highest advantage. The modules are connected in parallel, and at the back of every module, at any given time, you basically have a maximum voltage of 45, 50 volts on the roof, which is safe to touch as per fireman definition. So that's definitely one of the key advantages of the micro compared to a string, that's safety. The other advantage I want to talk about is the maximum energy harvest. Here again, on the right-hand side, a typical installation. So the modules are connected in series, and what dictates the performance of an array is the performance of the weakest module. So even in a perfect array, you may have clouds, shade, dust, hotspots and everything. And again, the performance of the string is dictated by the weakest module, which is here 50% limitation. With a microinverter, however, every module is optimized individually from its neighbors. So if one module is covered by shade or cloud and everything, of course, its performance will be affected in the same way when you're connected to a string. But thanks to the microinverters, the modules are connected in parallel, and you can harvest the maximum energy of every module. So you can really see the huge impact in terms of energy harvest and production of energy and power on a daily basis. So they work independently, and so it's just like you have a longer solar day every day with microinverters. The other advantage of a micro compared to a string is that you have no single point of failure. So eventually, in case of a microinverter fails, it happens sometimes, you still have all the other performing, and you can still enjoy the maximum production or close to the maximum production of your system. Microinverters are super easy to install, really plug and play, very limited number of SKUs. Basically, you have the micros, a trunk cable to conduct the AC, voltage and current, and off you go. And it's very modular, especially in the residential arena. You can start with a small system, and after a few years, you say, why not building up and increasing the system? And because of this, each module works independently of the rest. You can have an installation on a roof facing west and later on a roof facing south, and there will be no issue for optimization and design. And our micro, as I was mentioning in the introduction, are designed and built to last over 25 years. So it's highly reliable, and in Australian market, we give a warranty up to 15 years. So there is a lot of margin for safety. So as a summary, what is the advantage of microinverters? Powerful, higher energy harvest because each module is optimized individually of the rest. Reliable, guaranteed up to 15 years in Australia. Modular, you can expand easily your installation whenever you want. Safe to touch, only 50 volts at the back of the module at any given time, and really plug and play. Here, let me introduce our two flagship products. Both are CEC certified. So the Duo single phase, the YC600, 2 MPPTs. So even it's a one macro for 2 modules, it's really 2 MPPTs. So it's just like you have 2 micros together. It's a wider MPPT voltage range. It works from 22 volt up to 48 volts. So even at the very beginning of the day, your micro will start producing, and it's typically suited for any kind of module, 60 and 72 cells. The AC output power is 600 watts, and for a micro, it's just like a typical string. You can oversize the panels on the DC side with a ratio up to 20%. IP67 enclosure, so no problem to be outdoor, of course. And our communication is wireless ZigBee communication, so it's a mesh network. So I will show later on the communication units, but there is a communication between the communication unit, the energy communication unit, and the micro, but also within the micros themselves. So if the ECU, energy communication unit, cannot reach a micro, the micro can be reached by its direct neighbors, so you are always in communication with the entire system. And it's a single-phase inverter, as I mentioned, but it can be used in a 3-phase installation. In the quad phase, we have the QS1, Q for quad, S for single, and 1 first generation. Same characteristic as the YC600, except it has 4 MPPTs, so it's really 1 micro per module. Same characteristic, wider MPPT range, 60 to 72 cells modules are pretty well suited, and peak output is 1200 watt AC. You can oversize the DC side by 20%, typically as you would doing it with a string. IP67, ZigBee communication. It's a single phase, but it's also very well suited for 3-phase installation. What is our roadmap? So our current 2 flagship products are the YC600 and the QS1. The current QS1 is 1200 watts. There will be a boosted version available very soon for the Australian market in a few months, early Q1. So it's pretty much tomorrow, up to 1400 watts. And in the middle, around spring, we will launch 2 new products. So the DS3, we have changed our naming convention. So D is for duo, S is for single phase, and 3 will be the 3rd generation after the YC500, which is now end of life, the YC600, and now the DS3. So it will be also duo, so 2 PV panel, 2 MPPT, and up to 900 watt AC. So that's really, really a unique product, and it's the most power you can find in the market coming spring. And in the commercial arena, 3-phase, we are going to launch the QT2. So it's also a quad, Q for quad, T for 3-phase, and 2 for 2nd generation. 1800 watt AC, 2 MPPT, which is not so critical for commercial installation, and it's the only microinverter worldwide which is a native 3-phase, and all those micro, of course, have the integrated VDA relay and will be CEC listed and approved. So I mentioned already the energy communication unit, ECU. So what is that? We have 2 types of energy communication units. One typically for residential, which is very cute and compact. You can nicely put it in your living room close to your router, and you can monitor your solar production on a 24/7 panel per panel, either connected through Wi-Fi or through Ethernet cable, and Zigbee communication between the ECU and the micro, and Wi-Fi or Ethernet between the ECU and the cloud. We have an ECU R on Stamina, which is called the ECU C mainly for commercial. So this one is not so cute, typically installed in an AC box on a DIN rail, and it has the same properties as the ECU R with panel per panel monitoring, 24/7 Zigbee communication, but there is advanced feature. You could have consumption monitoring of the household, and also very important in some region of Australia, there is a 0 injection function. So if the PV produce more than what the house is consuming, the micro will shut down one by one to make sure there is no re-injection into the grid, which is one of the key in some Australian region. So typically what you can see on the web portal, either from your smartphone, your tablet, on the web page, you can see 24/7 the production of every panels. So very handy also for maintenance and optimizing the cost of the maintenance instead of troubleshooting the entire string. You can definitely see on the portal what's going wrong, and if you cannot really fix the issue remotely, you can just send a technician on site, and he knows exactly where he needs to go to exchange either the panel or either the micro. So something which maybe I should emphasize a little bit before going to the next slide is our technology is based on a firmware rather than hardware. So we have the ability to send commands remotely through a firmware update, which helps to fix 80% of the issue remotely without having to go on site as an installer, which is pretty handy nowadays. I cannot change the slide. I lost my mouse track. Oh, it works. So it's typically what you see, and you can see weakest panel on the bottom row. It's 100 watts compared to his neighbors. Maybe it's shaded. Maybe there is another issue. So something worth troubleshooting. So typically, how the AP system solution looks like. It's a residential installation, but that would be the same for commercial installation. So you can use either the QS1, the quad, so 1 micro for 4 panels, or the YC600, 1 micro for 2 panels. You can, in addition, mix and match both 600 and QS1. They have the same accessories. So if you have 10 panels, typically take 2 QS1 and 1 YC600, and you will be good for it. You need a gateway or energy communication unit, the ECU, and everything can be monitored through the cloud through our platform, the EMA, Energy Monitoring and Analysis Monitoring. Again, communication between the ECU and the micro is with Zigbee. So it's kind of a Wi-Fi under Stamina. It's not only a communication between the ECU and the micros, but also between each micros. And the ECU is connected either through Wi-Fi or Ethernet through the end user broadband router. And then at the end user can enjoy the full monitoring for free, 24/7 for the duration of the system and even more. So our solution is, we have a global footprint, and our solution is flexible and adaptable everywhere, in every part of the world, in any kind of situation, as you can see on those different pictures, for residential, also for commercial. We can use either the three-phase micro, or here the QS1 in a three-phase installation for commercial on top of a gas station in the US. Or different, again, full flexibility. Here is a camping site in Spain, and you can see different bungalows with mini systems, and each system is monitored through only one single ECUs, because we have an option to do an ECU share. So you can monitor the overall portfolio, and every inhabitant of the bungalow can only see his own little system. So full flexibility as well in terms of monitoring. That almost concludes my presentation. So if you guys want to know more about AP system, who we are, and the advantage of a micros compared to a string, please visit us on the exhibition hall and the AP system booth, and you could find any information on the flagship products, QS1, 600, the ECUs, nice videos about the coming DS3, which will be really a game changer in the industry. So 900 watt AC, 2 MPPTs, Zigbee, RPC ready, of course, and will be compatible with existing YC600 and QS1. And to circle back with the presentation of Trina previously, you can use the DS3 with panels up to 650 watt peak, which is rather unique, completely unique in the industry. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the opportunity. And if you have more questions, I'll be on the auditorium to answer your various questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for this great presentation. Since we are a little bit delayed today and it's already quite late, we will now skip the break in order to save some time and immediately switch over to the next session, which is focusing on the huge energy storage opportunity in Australia. It's my pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, who is Davide Pesenti, Research Analyst at EUPD Research. Davide helps companies in the renewable energy industry making informed decisions. In order to deliver bespoke solutions, he leverages his analytical skills and EUPD Research's exclusive access to primary data. Davide's main goal is to understand market developments and his clients' needs, and his presentation title for today is Conducting Successful Energy Storage Business in Australia, Downstream Insights and Brands. Enjoy Davide's presentation.
So hello everybody, thank you very much Daniel for your introduction. My name is Davide Pesenti and I'm a research analyst at EUPD Research. I'm gonna open my presentation now. Okay, so thank you very much to all the DigiCon team for organizing this event. Today I would like to present you some market data regarding the energy storage market in Australia, and then we're gonna dive into the results of our global PV installer monitor, which is not been published yet. So we are going to see some very fresh information straight from the Australian market. First of all, a brief introduction about the EUPD Research. We are a market research and consulting company. We have been analyzing PV and storage markets for 20 years now, and our key expertise is market intelligence. We also work very closely with market actors. So we conduct multiple surveys every year addressing end customers and also installers, but also EPCs. Today, we're going to focus on the results of our global PV installer monitor, by which we address installers. And on the basis of the data which we collect with our report, we also release our top brand PV seals, which you might have seen already around. Also, on top of that, we also conduct exclusive projects. So we also do consulting projects, which are tailored to the needs of our clients. Here we have a list with some of our clients. If you don't see your brand, your logo on this list, you should know that we would love to work with you. So do not hesitate to get in touch with us. So first of all, I want to present you some market data. According to a forecast, in 2020, 1.2 gigawatt of energy storage will be installed in Australia, which means that the energy storage market will almost double, reaching 2.7 gigawatt of cumulative storage capacity. For the first time in 2020, front of the meter capacity will grow more than behind the meter capacity. Nevertheless, we know that in Australia right now, there are many big projects being developed. So it would be interesting to really verify if this front of the meter capacity will match the expectation, because maybe due to the economic downturn, this might be a little less than, this number might be a bit less than expected. Nevertheless, if we compare the installations of 2020 with 2019, well, we see that in 2019, installed capacity was about 500 megawatt. So the growth in 2020, which we expect, is very huge. Now we focus on the residential segment. Here we present some data from Sunbeam. That's the Australia Battery Market Report. And we see the development of the energy storage market between 2016 and 2019. So we see that in 2019, more than 22,000 home energy storage were installed, a bit less than 2018, but still a very big growth, which makes up 233 megawatt, which means that there is a very huge potential in the residential segment for batteries in Australia. And now I would like to show you how you could exploit this potential. So we carry out our global PV installer monitor each year. This year, we're going to release the 13th edition, and we cover 8 markets in Europe plus Australia. Here we have the agenda of our report, which is based on data which we collect by conducting interviews via phone with installers. And for Australia this year, we have contact 200 installers. Basically, we cover 4 big topics: procurement management, brand management, market penetration, and satisfaction analysis. And we cover that for 4 technologies. So PV, inverters, storage solution, and this year for the first time, electric mobility. And then we also focus on distribution. During this presentation, we are gonna focus exclusively on the storage section. So here at least some key KPIs which we present with our report. So on the basis of our data which we collect, we basically monitor the perception of our brand among installers. And we also measure the percentage of installers which keep your brand in their portfolio. And then we also try to understand how satisfied installers are with the different brands which they offer. So first of all, we ask installer whether they offer storage solutions or not. And we see that in 2020, 41% of the interviewed installers offer storage solutions. And 29% is not offering storage solutions yet, but they're gonna do that in 2021. If we then focus on solar installers, we see that solar installers, so specialized installers, tend to offer storage solution more often than general installers. So we also want to understand why 30% of the installers do not offer storage solutions yet, and they're not planning to do that. So we basically asked them, and this is one of my favorite slides in the report. We asked installers the reasons why they're not planning to offer storage solutions. And on the top of the graph, we see the factors which play a bigger role in their choice. And then if you move toward the bottom of the graph, then you see the factors which play a less important role. So generally, we see that high prices and lack of expertise are still the main factors which restrain installers from offering storage solutions. But what's nice to see is that the blue dot, which represents 2020, has shifted towards the bottom of the graph, which generally speaking means that installers are getting more and more confident with installing battery systems. And also we see that blue dot for all the factors is below the light blue dot from 2019. So generally, installers are getting more and more confident with storage solutions. Here we display the customer segments, and we see that in 2020, 72% of all storage installations were new installs, and that 70% of the installations were batteries with a capacity above up to 50 kilowatt hours. So quite big batteries for the residential segment. In the procurement management section, we focus on understanding how and where installers procure their storage systems. So first of all, we ask them if they procure their systems, the storage systems from the manufacturer or through wholesalers. And according to our data, 75% of the installers procure their storage systems from the wholesalers. And also in this section of the report, we list and analyze from which wholesalers the installers procure their storage systems. The core of our brand management analysis is the unaided brand awareness, by which we ask installers to mention the brands of storage solutions, storage brands, which they mean, with which they know. And we see that 49% of the installers in 2020 mentioned Tesla, which means that Tesla has a very strong positioning in the mind of the installers, also because many of them mentioned Tesla in the first place. And if you compare the data with the results from 2019, we see that Tesla gained some brand awareness, moving from the second up to the first position. This might also have something to do with the big batteries which Tesla is installing in Australia, so maybe not really regarding the residential segment. And we also see that LG has lost some ground, moving from the first position to the second. And we also see that Sonnen has moved from the fifth up to the fourth position, so improving its brand awareness. So we know that brand awareness is crucial, but it's not everything. In fact, we see that if we then analyze the share of installers which offer specific brands, we see that 53% of the installers offer LG storage system. So in this case, the majority of installers offers storage system from LG, and Tesla now is in the second position with 39%. We also have to notice that LG has strengthened its position in its installer portfolio compared to 2019, but also Tesla is gaining more and more shares in the portfolio of the installers. So generally speaking, happy installers are the best installers. This is why we ask installers which storage brands they would recommend. And we do that by asking them from a scale from 1 to 10, whether they would like to recommend a brand or not. And then we list the results according to the NPS, the Net Promoter Scores, which is obtained by subtracting the detractors from the promoters. And in this way, we can rank the different brands according to the Net Promoter Scores on a scale from -100 to 100. So 100 is the perfect score, the highest Net Promoter Scores, which in 2020 has been achieved only by Power Plus Energy, which means that none of the leading brands has a perfect Net Promoter Scores. This, of course, has something to do with the number of respondents who rated the storage system from Power Plus Energy. But not only that, in fact, we also focus on the factors which installers value the most when choosing a specific brand. And here we see that product quality is the most important features which installers take into consideration when deciding to buy and to offer a storage brand, but also they really value the ease of installation of the products, and they also value the possibility for the end customers to monitor the storage system with an app. So now I would like to briefly summarize the results of this presentation. First of all, we've seen that Australia offers a big potential for end storage systems, both in the front of the meter market, but also for the residential segment. Also, we have seen that most of the foot PV installers are getting more and more confident with home storage solutions, but still economic viability and lack of expertise are still their main points of concern. Regarding brands, Tesla is the most popular brand among installers, but LG is still the home battery brand, which is most often used by installers. And quality and ease of installations are the two features which are most valued by installers when choosing a storage brand. That was it from my side. If you have any question, you can write them in the chat box. And also here you have my email address, so don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you very much for your attention and enjoy the rest of the presentation. Bye.
Davide, for this great first input presentation in the energy storage session for today. Great market updates, all based on primary research by EUPD. And now we are coming again back to the technical aspects of this session. And it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, who is Jitendra Tomar, Director e-Services at Sonnen. Jitendra is responsible for Sonnen's consumer energy business, delivering Sonnenflat, a tailored energy tariff for solar battery customers, and Sonnen Connect, a rewards product for consumers providing grid services. His team also trades Sonnen's virtual power plants into the wholesale electricity markets. Jitendra's presentation title for today is Challenges in Monetizing Distributed Storage in Energy Markets. Thank you very much, and handing over now.
Okay, thank you. Just give me a second. I'm going to put my presentation on. Right, I think we are good to go. Yes, thank you very much. Like I was introduced, I work with Sonnen, a German battery manufacturer who is present in a number of different countries. So my talk is let me see if I can. Yes, my talk is all about challenges in monetizing distributed storage in energy markets. I guess where I'm coming from is the practicalities of being in the business of storage from services perspective, and from the business of storage in getting the consumers involved in the energy markets perspective. I know there's a lot of talk about storage participation in energy markets, be it from the financial perspective or from the engineering perspective of grid services. So we're going to look at some of the practicalities and how much of the talk is, I guess, hope and aspirations versus what actually happens on the ground. So I understand that this conference and session is global in nature. There are a number of people who are looking at us from outside of Australia. So I just wanted to give a brief introduction to the energy markets which exist in Australia. In fact, there are two energy markets in Australia. One is on the eastern side of the Australian continent, which is reflected here in green, which is known as the National Electricity Market. And there's also a market in Western Australia, which is the Western Australian Energy Market, which is around Perth, between Perth and Kalgoorlie. So we're not going to talk about the Western space. We will be concentrating on the eastern side of the National Electricity Market. Some of the key facts about this market on the east is that may be of interest to people is that our market is an energy-only gross pool market. It is not, doesn't deal in capacities. If you're in energy, You have to deliver energy in order to get paid for energy. And if you're buying energy, then you have to pay for everything that you have bought from the wholesale side of things. Big numbers, I guess we have a small customer base of 10 million, both business and residential. The key point, I guess, that would be of interest to everybody is we have a significant amount of our installed generation capacity comes from the residential sector. We have about 2.2 million households out of about 8 million residential customers who in fact have their own generating sources, and that has natural the market potential and impact for distributed storage and respect to their participation in the marketplace. So we are talking about householders. Now, just to look at both sides of the fence here, when we want to monetize something, the business trying to monetize value is in fact sitting in the middle. On one side, we have the energy markets, where one can monetize the capacities. There are a number of opportunities that exist on the national electricity market. One is the energy, buying and sell of wholesale energy, and also the balancing services, which is known as a frequency control ancillary services markets. There are in fact 8 frequency markets and 1 energy market. So that from the market perspective, we are talking about 9 possibilities where one can monetize things. On the consumer side, I guess when we're in the middle, we have to get consumers on board, people who have spent their capital on buying batteries. They naturally ask the question, why should I let you or someone else use my battery and my energy? That's something that I have paid for. So we have to be very careful, and also this is really one of the big challenges, is to make sure that the consumer understands the benefit to them, which I have just summarized into 3 parts. The economic benefits, into the sense, is how much money do they make as a result of participation? Is there any social aspect to this? Do they help stabilize the grid, help their neighbors? What does it mean for them, and how do they feel about it? And of course, there's the new emerging trend, which we talk about to consumers, which is the opportunity cost. Because of the level of penetration of solar panels we have in the house, on the grid, there are things happening, movements happening in Australia, where the distribution companies and the system operator is talking about stopping the exports from the installed solar panels, which affects the consumers because it affects their earning potential. So these are the 3 key things we talk about when we're trying to get them interested in participating in markets. Now, just wanted to give you people a feel for, in terms of distributed space, the number of players who are in fact active in monetizing distributed storage, and which markets they are active in. The first, I guess, the player in the market who started monetizing storage was an organization called Amalgamated Energy Solutions, which is an offshoot of Reposit Power of Canberra. And I guess in Australia, I would call them one of the pioneers, if not the pioneers of VPPs in aggregating distributed solar. So they've been active in the contingency services, all 6 of them, I guess for some time in New South Wales, quite a bit of capacity that they have installed. More recently, last year, I guess the AGL also became active on the frequency side of contingency frequency side of things in the state of South Australia. After that, Energy Locals became active with their VPP. It is, in fact, Energy Locals is a retailer, but the VPP is driven by Tesla. So Tesla is, in fact, the principal. They have the biggest distributed VPP in the marketplace. Earlier this year, Simply Energy came on board with 3 megawatts, again in South Australia. And more recently, I guess a retailer of solar panels entered the VPP space with 1 megawatt of capacity in only one of the services, a company called Shine Hub, again in South Australia. And Son and ourselves, we also became active on the contingency services, but in New South Wales. So this is the distribution of the participants. The interesting things that is to notice is that no one is active in the regulation side of the regulation market. Regulation is about active control by the system operator to adjust the charge and discharge of energy from the VPP based on the condition of the grid. So the contingency ones are really insurance schemes. You get paid for being available, but not for delivery. For regulation, you must deliver in order to be paid for that. On the energy side of things, we are talking about whether it's worthwhile buying or selling energy in the energy market. It's an opaque space. One must be a retailer to benefit from this. And publicly, we don't know who is active and who is not in that space, is what I can say. Now, just to give you a feel for why, I guess this is the reason it kind of explains why people are in those markets. There are, if we isolate the New South Wales and South Australian place, year to date so far, I guess as of yesterday, the 6 contingency service of frequency regulation, we are talking Australian dollars, about $300,000 of cumulative value so far. This is not necessarily the value somebody has captured, but this is the value that is being traded in the marketplace. South Australia is 3 times as big, quite significant amount of dollars. A lot to do with the fact that we had some network separation events, I guess, earlier in the year. So some of those high values come from there. Also give you a feel for if one were to trade in the energy market, and I've taken a proxy that the fuel cost for a battery stored energy is about 25 cents per kilowatt hour, in the sense that this is sort of the regular tariff rate for retail energy. Then, and if you wanted to be arbitraging energy or playing in the space and above, about $250 per megawatt hours, how much energy, how much value that will be potentially be available to you. So reasonable amount of money available in Australia, and this is why a lot of people are in Australia are interested. This here is, I have taken, I guess, a real day, a real trading day, which was Friday, of all the different players playing in the frequency space. The interesting thing to note, the left-hand side, the chart on the left-hand side is the raise services. That means the ability to inject energy into the grid in case the frequency drops. And on the right-hand side is the lower services, which is the ability to the charge or withdraw energy from the grid if the frequency gets too high or the system overspeeds. I guess the interesting thing to note over here is there's a marked difference between the capacity that is traded by Energy Locals / Tesla versus the rest of the people. And given the values that I described in the previous slide, it's a fair amount of money. When you're talking about in South Australia, close to $900,000 per megawatt, year to date, that's a lot of money being earned, even if it's part of that. Even if one is only earning part of that available value. Some other things to note is I find fascinating is during the daytime we are having lots of solar in the system, which tends to push prices down quite substantially in the wholesale market. In South Australia, it has been going negative for quite often. So what that means is there's too much energy. So one should be that the distributed solar should be acting as a sponge. That means withdrawing energy from the grid. But the interesting thing is that the frequency markets are not showing any sufficient value, or there's an inability of all the VPP providers to have enough excess capacity available in the batteries to suck in energy off the grid. I guess what it is everybody's batteries are full, so we can't really take any more energy from the grid. But I think one would do that, perhaps reserve a bit of extra space if the market was willing to pay for it. I personally have found the reason we're not doing it is the market is not willing to pay for it, which I find fascinating because we do have too much energy in the system in the middle of the day. Some other little tidbits we are finding is that, I personally don't think, for example, on the raised size of the services, the clearing capacity should be flat across the day, because as in the middle of the day, there's a lot of energy being exported, and your ability to export, in fact, limits itself because distribution network companies limit the amount of power you can inject into the grid at any given time. So if the solar panels are exporting, then the amount available for batteries has been reduced. But for some reason, some of the VPP traders are not really catering for it, and EMO is not checking up on it, as far as I'm concerned. So this will probably change in the future. Finally, I guess in summary, if we were to look at the challenges that exist over the horizon, what I can say is these are early days for monetizing distributed solar. Very quickly, we have had in Australia a reasonable number of players enter the market over the last year. It is quite substantial when we compare to Europe. I've been tracking some of the number of players. We still, I think, in aggregate, seem to be more players in the market than we have seen in Germany or UK in total. So it's quite active space, and it's probably going to get more active. We still have some challenges. Interesting things coming up in the future is we will be moving to a 5-minute settlement market for energy in October 2021. And I think this is going to affect the frequency market because there's a bit of the timelines are going to overlap. One of the services, the slow service, which is the 5-minute service, is going to overlap with the 5-minute energy market, and how that's going to distribute value, we will see and know. We don't know. The other thing is that there are some technical specifications from market participation side of things which need to change. And the question is whether they will change in time and whether the incumbents will allow those things to be changed for the distributed storage to participate fully. And the other thing that has been very, very recent development in Australia is the government, the state governments are putting up a lot of money to encourage a grid scale storage to be going into the market. New South Wales is kind of said they will be encouraging 2 gigawatts of grid scale storage over the next few years. And the question comes up, the size of a market for balancing services is limited. Will this subsidized grid scale storage crowd out the distributed storage? Interesting question. And finally, I personally think that in order for it to be treated equally by the industry and the regulators and the operators, the distributed space, we have to get bigger. We have to get service providers in distributed space who are of substantial size, who can take on I guess, the inherent power that exists with incumbents. And that's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jitendra, for the very insightful inputs here. Similar like Sonnen, the next company which our speaker is representing, Alpha ESS, both of them are our founding partners at Solar and Storage DigiCon. So just as a reminder, please make sure to visit their booth on the show floor right after the session. As already briefly indicated now, Alpha ESS will be next on stage. We have with us today Simon Du, who is product manager. His presentation title is Energy Storage Systems in Australia, Throwbacks and Application Prospects. Thank you very much, Simon, in advance. It's my pleasure to hand over to you right now for the presentation.
Thank you so much. PowerPoints, just give me a second. Just give me a second. Hey guys, my name is Simon Du. I'm the product manager here in Alpha ESS Australia. So today I'll give some introductions or like a presentations for the energy storage systems A3s. So we're gonna focus on 4 things today. First of all, will be the technologies back in 20th centuries. The part 2 is lithium-ion technologies, how it goes, how it's being invented, and how what's the status of the technologies. And the third part will be talking about applications, about how the energy storage system being formed. Finally will be the future perspective. Let's pay attention on the 20th century's ones, right? So in 1749, Benjamin Franklin was the first time actually used the term batteries to describe the set of linked capacitors. It is firstly getting charged using the static generators and discharged by touching metals to the electrode. Well, that's the very first times where people realize there's a form of energy storage could be existing. And before that, the energy comes and when it's generating and have to be used immediately. And following, you can see the Daniel cells, bird cells, all those cells is belong to the big family, which called the non-rechargeable batteries. So in the early stage, people been trying to improve on the structure of that batteries and makes so many of them, but none of them could be recharged. Well, the LISAs come over at 1859, which invented by Gaston Plate. And he actually invented the first ever batteries could be recharged and by passing the reverse current through it. Inventions will actually allow people to think that the battery itself could not just be used one time; it could be used multiple times and could be scaled up and to actually really acting like the reservoir of the electricities. And followed by the cobalt, the alkaline batteries, well-known name is alkaline batteries, is actually commercialized in Sweden in 1910s and finally propagated into the States at 1946. The first models was actually robust and significantly better energy density compared to the lead-acid, but extremely expensive. But we all know what alkaline battery went through. It went massive, and followed by the third phase, which is nickel iron, and that's actually brought up by the Thomas Edison's. They actually applied the technology originally on electric car ideas, and the electric cars surprisingly was actually being brought up and trying to make it work 120 years ago. I wasn't realized until the moment I do the research like this. But that batteries back then has a difficulty to maintain structure. So the leakage problems had made the electric cars miss a chance to be alive, and the petrol car take over. So the first phase is the lithium ion and lithium itself. So the lithium is the metals with the lowest energy, densities, but with the greatest electrochemicals potentials. Is and energy weight to weight ratios. Akira Yoshino of the Asahi Chemicals in Japan is actually built the first lithium-ion batteries prototypes. And Sony was actually commercialized these lithium batteries in 1991. I know what you're thinking is it's not the same company who made the delicious beer. So I love the both company, but like it's different ones, all called Asahi. So the next phase, we're going to talk about the lithium families with his terms. The NMC is well known, called nickel magnetite cobalt oxidized. The applications was on the EVs and energy storage and power tools. So the advantage of that is have a good specific energies, but the downside is not that as reliable as the other chemistries. And NCAs called cobalt aluminum oxidized. They've been widely using on the AV applications. It gives you the high specific energies, but not very stable. Similar issues with NMCs. Well, LFPs, we call that lithium iron phosphate. So this is the technology what alpha batteries use. So the power tools, the EVs, energy storage is the most suitable application for it. It has a medium specific energies, but the highlight points is actually safer than the other families. It stays. So the last one will be the lithium cobalt oxidized, which widely used in the smartphones scenarios. Like it got high specific energy densities just because you have to put into the portable device, but actually it's too sensitive to the low temperatures. I guess you guys all experience that your iPhones could be switched off during the cold weather. That's caused by these chemical natures. So the next slides we're going to talk about the different kind of energy storage media. So the first one is the fossil fuel. It's the natural ones. We all know that about this, oil and gas, but it causes greenhouse gas emissions and it's not renewable. It's not a renewable resource. So the second ones, we even some like a delegate like a process structures and in metals, mechanical way to storage energy. It's been going around for in the industry for a while, and the gravitational storage, like flying and also the flying wheels, compressed airs. They all are actually storage energies in the mechanical ways, but they either expensive to build or very sensitive to or very picky on the side. For flying wheels is different, so it can only storage a certain amount of energies, not the big ones, but it can be their response was actually okay for the to actually increase the inertia of the systems, but like not suitable for the large storage. Electricals, capacitors, supercapacitors. We've been talking through these technologies recently. They have a really quick charge and discharge response, but not as good as the large scale storage. And also they are expensive to build as well. And the fourth one will be electrochemicals, chemicals. So which like rechargeable batteries and battery systems. So this is so far most economical way to storage energies in large scales, and also is actually getting one foot into the commercialized. Have yet get have exploded or exploded developed, and in a few, but it will happen in the near future. And the second last is the thermal ones. So they actually storage the energies in another forms, in the form of heat. So the melting salt, the steam accumulators is all transfer that the energies to another form, which could be potentially much easier to storage. But the drawback for it is they have a low energy efficiency. So when you change in forms of the energy, it loses every single time. So the chemical ones at last is the biofuels and hydrogen storage. So it's been alive and been talking about the for really long times, probably longer than solar panels. But like the drawbacks for them is actually first of all, it's expensive to build. But like the hydrogen, or you may heard recently, there's no new company called Lava or Lova. They have their hydrogen storage systems coming into the products, which you could buy it straight away from their website, and it seems like the first step to be commercialized. But actually, there's 40 kilowatt hours of storage. Probably not all of them could be used directly due to the low cycling efficiency. So it still need a bit of time to moving forward. And here comes to the most widely used technology in Australia. The NMC batteries on the left is mainly for Tesla and LG Chems, and they got benefits from their EV cars manufacturer lines, and they could simply just adopt that concept to package the batteries as a battery storage, home battery storage. But on the right hand side, we got the LFP batteries, which potentially be safer than like in chemical, like in physics, law in physics is safer than the MCs. And for alpha ESS, we specifically use the metal cans to actually contain the chemicals, make it much more durable. Plus on top of these features. So like the next one is going to introduce how the energy alpha ESS energy storage system make your home energy efficient. In the daytime, the solar will produce energies. Not all of them will be used by your applications or appliance. The accessory energy will go to the batteries and saved for the late night use. And at the same time, we have the dedicated backup port, which towards your essential energies, like that we give you UPS power on the backup, which regardlessly what the grid on live or fell down or blackout, you will have like a 24/7 backup powers in the UPS. Finally, let's talk about the future energy storage perspective. So I think in the future, first of all, we have to standing on the shoulder of the giants. So the maintained structure of the electricity infrastructure is really important. We are actually not abandoning the old structure. We are actually trying to adopt it. Secondly, we'll have the controlled nuclear fusion, substituting the current thermal power plants. Just because like the thermal plants were actually burning the renewable, burning the non-renewable sources, and control nuclear fusion is more clean to in a large scale to generating energies. And battery systems for the households was actually to acting like the small reservoirs distributed like widely in the networks. They actually to make the supply part of the NEM market in NEM markets wide. So adding the battery storage is not only gives you like a bit of energy savings for each individuals, but also it actually like make the network stronger, because originally we will have the supply and demand, which always have to be balanced. Otherwise, we will facing blackout somewhere. But in the new scenarios, so the balances have to be like perfect. Otherwise, you will get blackouts in the old structure. But in the new structures, on the supply part of it, you actually have the batteries to acting like the reservoir. And that's not only just the central ones, they can distribute it across the networks to make the networks could generating and absorb energy at the same time. Oh, sorry, not at the same time, but like could actually achieve both functions. So in that way, on both ends, supply and demand, you can have adjustable function, adjustable abilities. So the balance was more like more stable. Will be much more stable than the conventional ones. Here's my finish of my presentation, and thank you all. I will hand over, and you please enjoy the next presentations after me.
Thank you very much, Simon. Very well done presentation, good insights, best practice examples, and of course highlighting the technology advancements of Alpha ESS. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to our concluding speaker for today and the energy storage session, which is Dan Sauer, Regional Sales Manager at Simplify. As Simplify's business development and market research manager, Dan focuses on cultivating both emerging and established global markets, while also analyzing market trends and policy changes that inform Simplify's partnerships and product development. Dan will deliver his presentation on the topic battery storage trends in the Australian market, using LFP batteries for residential and commercial projects. Thank you very much in advance and enjoy the presentation.
Good day, everybody. This is Dan over at Simplify Power. We are a battery storage manufacturer out of the United States. We've been doing business in Australia for the past 5 years now and have been around since 2010. So I really appreciate you all attending. It's been a couple of years now since I've actually been in Australia. However, we have some great regional partners throughout the area. And today I really just want to take some time, educate on the perspective from our company, certain trends, emerging technologies, best practices, and some business opportunities that we can hopefully take advantage of going into the new year and the years to follow. So I really appreciate you attending. Any and all questions, I'll be leaving my email address, contact information at the end of the presentation, and we're always happy, regardless of time zones, to help answer questions as they come up. And so with that, today we'll be discussing LFP batteries, that's lithium iron phosphate batteries for residential commercial projects specifically. So looking forward to discussing, looking forward to your questions, and let's get started. So the topics that will be discussed more thoroughly are going to be, let's start general. Why lithium iron phosphate? What's the differences there? Capitalizing on a smarter battery to really add value to the projects, whether we're talking residential or commercial. And then finally, let's get into some of the best practices and those considerations when discussing safety, reliability, and always cost with our customers. So why LFP? Again, lithium iron phosphate. With considerations on lithium batteries, we have a handful always available to us. And so the main considerations, the topics that are most common to really come up for you and your customers during your pitches or just day to day are going to revolve around a few key things. And that you'll see on the left-hand side, the far left-hand side. And first, of course, is safety, danger of thermal runaway, essentially fire, right? Followed by toxic elements. Is it safe for the landfill? You know, end of life, recyclability, something that people are always considering. One of those hidden practices is, does it involve any abusive mining practices? Around the world, we source so many things through our supply chain. Where do they come from? How do they evolve into the final product? And, you know, who's digging those up? Again, we'll look at ventilation required, other ancillary type equipment to ensure the safety of the batteries. And of course, cooling equipment, which is common for a variety of batteries. And are there any additional monitoring or equipment required, typically related to the warranties? And then what are those temperatures that they can really withstand? So as you'll see here, LFP comes out as a clear winner for stationary storage. Let's be clear, it may not be the best bet, obviously, for a more mobile type application, but within a stationary situation, an LFP battery is more often than not going to be the absolute top best solution for most customers. So in the category of, you know, thermal runaway and fire, is there a risk? No, of course it can. Anything can catch on fire that's made of a material, but in its ability to propagate fire, that is to spread fire outside of its, you know, individual cell, LFP is by far the safest and will not propagate that fire externally. Whereas, as we see with other chemistries in the lithium family, you know, most commonly NMC, LMO, NCA, LCO, they all inherently have cobalt in them. That's the property or the material that is going to propagate that fire externally and more or less run rampant in a situation of fire, whether it's internal to that battery specifically, or perhaps an external fire from the home or the garage where it's located. So in terms of safety, LFP, again, second to none there. As far as toxic elements, again, cobalt isn't within LFP chemistry, so there aren't any toxic elements there. It is landfill safe for those that are concerned with what happens at the end of life of that battery. LFP is going to be safe to recycle, and it does not involve any abusive practices. We all know a majority of cobalt comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo in the African continent, and there's oftentimes some pretty unfortunate practices in how that is mined, oftentimes involving children. So it's just something as a supply chain to certainly consider what's going into that battery and how that impacts everyone just from a human perspective. So philosophically, LFP is something we at Simplify, of course, chose over 10 years ago. Ventilation and cooling, let's put those two together, because those are some ancillary equipment that are typically required, as you can see, for other chemistries that are lithium, but not required for LFP for most warranties, including our own as well. And then safety and monitoring equipment, not required either for an LFP chemistry such as Simplify's. And then something really important for the variety of temperatures, environments that batteries can go in, so you can reach a wider audience, is its ability to withstand high temperature environments and even cold environments. And so with LFP, Simplify specifically, we can reach up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, that is 200 C. So with that in mind, keep those chemistry comparisons forefront and understand that the big takeaway is from safety, supply chain, and extra costs that may not be reflected in that upfront price tag when discussing with customers. So to reiterate here, let's focus on an example. Here at Simplify, we have what we see is our number one product. It's a building block of sorts. It's a 3.8 kilowatt hour battery in either 24 or 48 volts. And as you'll see on the left-hand side, chemistry, lithium iron phosphate. Form factor, what we'll see is that we have a few options in the industry. First being cylindrical, the second pouch, and the third prismatic. Now prismatic, it's a safe approach. It's just very bulky and large, so it adds to the footprint. The pouch, certainly the cheapest option, which is why we see those in a lot of consumer electronics. But as that pouch heats up, it expands, contracts, expands, contracts, and that heat radiates outwards, of course, and is cause for concern. So it's a less safe option. It's just more cost effective. However, the Goldilocks situation is that cylindrical cell, something similar to like a AA battery. And that in and of itself improves both in terms of its footprint, but also its safety and power output when strung together. So within a Simplify battery, for example, you'll receive the best of both worlds. That's an LFP chemistry and a cylindrical cell within each unit. Now, just to touch one last time on thermal runaway, here's some specifics for those that want to get more in depth on it. It's really comes down to when the battery, or more specifically the cell, actually becomes hot enough that the chemical reaction begins to generate more heat, and that just accelerates the action, which is, you know, the propagation of that fire, and can cause off-gassing, which leads to the fire or the explosion that we've seen in the news more recently with a few companies and their recalls. Now, what causes it? It's really typically down to the cell failure. And at the end of the day, it can be caused by external heat sources, of course, like an unrelated fire, as I mentioned before, and anything that really increases the temperature enough to be, you know, self-sustaining. So that is thermal runaway in a nutshell, and something that as time moves on and as policies and regulations catch up with the different lithium technologies, we're already seeing it in the States, we're seeing it in Australia, and even in Europe as well, with their concerns around thermal runaway, chemistry choice, and the safety for homeowners and businesses. Now, again, one last slide here, just detailing the thermal runaway in a more, you know, detailed approach. But the big takeaway here is LFP being able to reach a higher temperature than a traditional, say, NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt, and other cobalt-based chemistries before thermal runaway begins. And so, as you can see, LFP, right around 200 C it can reach before it even begins, whereas NMC is at a much lower temperature and can cause thermal runaway far sooner. So you have a much better margin of error should a worst case scenario happen when choosing LFP. So again, things to be considered. Now, let's stay on the topic of safety here, because maintaining a safe operating temperature for the cobalt-based system or cobalt battery, there's added cost, and that's something that inevitably will come up with your customers. We'll touch on a little bit more later in the presentation. And so two things here, actually three, is going to be it adds cost, an additional point of failure, and of course, that additional equipment, it takes power to run it. So there's a parasitic drain on the battery capacity over the lifetime, which it really does add up. Now, as an example, again, Simplify batteries have a wider operating temperature than a cobalt-based battery, but also The batteries require no ventilation, cooling, or any thermal monitoring, all things that are, again, additional cost, additional point of failures, and a drain on the overall battery performance. So I'd like to just share with you all just a brief overview of some of the products that we do offer through our distribution throughout the country. And it starts out on a nice little mobile scale, expeditionary series, great for disaster response and just on the go, keep it in your truck or your car. Those smaller units are great, including a fold out solar panel kit, but the battery modules, that's the bread and butter with Simplify batteries, and they're scalable, up into the, hundreds of kilowatt hours range, down to 3.8 kilowatt hours at its most simple level. And then of course there's integrated systems and high voltage, but what they all have in common is that they're safe, they're proven, and they're simple in terms of installation, essentially zero maintenance, and long lasting. So in terms of the safety, we've already gone over that. Proven 10 years of deployments, longer than our warranty. And in Australia alone, over the past 5 years, we've had 0 batteries come back from the field with any issues, which is something we really do enjoy hanging our hat on and proud of, something that will continue. So let's talk about adding some value for your customers, because as we grow in the industry across all the options that you have from a variety of battery manufacturers, the batteries themselves are becoming smarter in addition to the power electronics, the inverters that we're choosing. So I'd like to discuss and share with you a few key details here. So let's identify the problem that we're trying to help solve first and foremost. And for the majority of folks, it's limited access to a safe, reliable, and affordable, sustainable power. So on one side, we have escalating energy costs. We're seeing it not only in the US, but throughout Australia, throughout Europe. Energy costs are on the rise. It's an annual trend. And so residential electricity prices have consistently increased year over year. Utilities are using various ways to engage customers to make smarter decisions, whether it's time of use rates or surge pricing. But at the end of the day, we're still expecting an increase of about 30% of electricity prices just in the next 5 years alone. So beyond that, we still have a great deal of diesel generation for remote and island communities, just throughout the world, but certainly here in Australia. And that can really range from 50 cents to over $1 per kilowatt hour in some of the applications I've been a part of just in the past 12 months. And that's where we can really make a huge improvement with our customers, is helping solve those problems for energy cost. Additionally, there's failing infrastructure for larger projects. So just alone, because of weather-related power outages, they're becoming significantly more common. And we all remember earlier this year the tragedies that occurred with the rampant wildfires. And I myself was even caught in a wildfire about 1.5 years ago, something that you just never forget. It's something out of Hollywood movies. And the folks that are impacted after that, they either lose their livelihoods, their homes, all these areas where simple microgrids or remote power storage can alleviate a lot of the aging infrastructure that utilities have neglected. And so we're starting to see more and more communities take these projects on. And with that, energy storage is a fantastic fit that can scale to the needs of those communities. Now, decarbonization, those are more governmental type initiatives. And of course, we're going back and forth between a variety of administrations in our government. But the common trend continues that most administrations are still on the side of decreasing carbonization and supplementing that with renewable energy sources, of which energy storage fits perfectly in that puzzle piece to help. Now, a few of these opportunities, just to reiterate, are going to be heavy duty charging for vehicles, creating that network of charging available throughout the country, the highways, the thoroughfares, all of that. We'll also have great opportunities in cities and workplaces, so commercial installations and multi-unit dwellings, apartments, compounds, and everything in between. So with that, we'll be able to afford more people access to safe, reliable, and affordable sustainable power, both on grid, as well as those that choose to be off the grid. So as an example, Simplify Power has recently this year come out with the Amplify battery. This is a battery that has integrated communications ports in it, and it comes in a really small footprint, which is excellent for a variety of reasons. So as you'll see on the right-hand side, there's some specs. You'll find it on the website as well. I won't spend too much time on it, but they're easily mobile. They're great logistically, getting them to remote locations or in urban dense populations as well. And they can be oriented any which way, which provides a lot of flexibility to installers for unique areas where space is confined, or you can't hang it traditionally on a wall. So specifically related to the communications aspects, it's a closed loop communication with the inverter. There's no external cards required for the inverter integration. And currently right now, Solarc is one of our leading inverters that we've integrated with, but Selectronic, Victron, all the majors are still in the final testing phases for integrating correctly with the Amplify battery, and that will be starting going into the new year. So we're really excited about that, because what that's going to bring is a battery that provides a high level of accurate readings for the state of charge, the voltage, charge and discharge, really flexible when it comes to sizing the variety of applications you can do. And furthermore, I always say it's a future proof when I'm discussing it with customers, because when you can do remote upgrades to the firmware, it really is a game changer for a lot of folks to future proof that system for the next 10 years and beyond, you know, the warranty period. And then finally, speaking of warranties, Simplify again carries a 10-year unlimited cycle warranty at 100% depth of discharge. When speaking with customers, of course, I do tend to recommend an 80% depth of discharge, just because it's going to maximize that life of that battery well beyond 10 years. Traditionally, in the years past, we've had a 10,000 cycle warranty, but we wanted to simplify it, pun intended, but we wanted to simplify it and just do a straight 10-year warranty. But since we've been around for darn near over 10 years now, we're very confident in the ability of the battery to provide energy storage well beyond 10 years. And just because it comes to that 10-year warranty, something I always remind people of is that at the end of life, you know, that 10-year warranty, you're still going to have 80% of capacity remaining. So that battery is still alive and kicking well beyond that 10 years, assuming at 80% depth of discharge. And then just quickly, the Simplify Power energy storage systems. We're leveraging renewables by decoupling the supply and the demand on the grid and off grid, reducing CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions. That's something you hear all the time. But it really provides a lot of creativity in how we can reimagine the power grid and poles and wires and remote communities. And at the end of the day, we have to, every single one of us, we all have to deliver economic value. And by eliminating the economic losses due to power outages and reducing the daily energy costs through demand charge management or peak shaving or time of use, whichever utility is using those, we can really make a huge beneficial impact, economically speaking, for both the end user as well as the community at large. So I wanted to share a few deployments Now, not all of these will be in Australia, of course, but they're highly relatable and they're within the region, and they're my most recent projects. And the first one is here over in New Zealand, where we worked with PowerCo. And the challenge there, similar to situations throughout Australia that I've worked on over the years, has been upgrading the network and improvement of the lines. Were just not cost effective. It would have been an incredible amount of money to build out the lines to that site. And what we came up with in working with PowerCo is to create containerized solutions. And while I mentioned before the footprint of our standard 3.8 kilowatt hour battery, the little black box in the bottom left-hand corner, those were able to be airlifted through helicopter to locations difficult to gain access, and have been ideal for remote and emergency situations, and have been providing supplemental and alternative electricity to the utility grid in certain situations. But at the end of the day, it really came down to the dairy and egg farmers being able to access just uninterruptible power. And of course, on the economic side, reducing the significant operation and management costs through the elimination of the transmission lines. So it's a huge win-win. Something we'll see more common as time moves forward and lines need to be reassessed and reevaluated in building them out as communities spread out further from city centers. These are all considerations to make and can make a huge impact on your project penciling out economically. So it's something that you can always talk with our team on, draw from past experiences, past success stories, and replicate it for your customers as well. Another one was actually done over in Hawaii, but the reason I love it is we are in certain few discussions with other school districts, not only around the world, but specifically in Australia as well, where the off-grid solar and energy storage to power school districts, especially in hot areas where air conditioning can be a huge draw to make it comfortable for students to learn. The Department of Education over in Hawaii needed to upgrade 256 of those schools throughout the island and provide adequate, cooling, all AC, of course. And the estimated cost, it still blows me away today, with new AC was $1.7 billion. And that was mainly due to the upgrading of electrical infrastructure, old buildings, and just the utility grid in general. But at the end, what we were able to accomplish is with solar and the PHY storage, simplified storage systems, made it financially feasible to run the AC units while lowering the energy costs by 6%. Huge savings for over 1,300 classrooms in the 88 of those schools so far just to date. And this is something for those that are focusing on either public properties or large installations in especially warm climates where AC is, absolutely necessary to work and function. This is a great example to draw on a big success story and something, again, we can replicate throughout, regions. And then finally, another one here. This one was actually just off the coast. And what we really wanted to accomplish here was an off-grid power situation, right? So creating a single system to the power multiple dwellings. And we partnered with using Victron. So we created that system with a complement of different equipment to generate, store, and provide just 100% resilience on a remote off-grid island without compromising the lifestyle. So this is another prime example of logistics meeting functionality, meaning you can get into remote locations or densely populated urban centers with a small footprint and provide a large amount of power. So that the end result there was the customer expected to save roughly 1.6 million or 14,000 US just in the first year alone. So it's a significant savings. Again, another big bonus for them that's going to last well over a decade and bring power to their remote location. And then another containerized situation here for water filtering. It's a big topic that's been coming up more and more throughout a few of the provinces that I've been working in over the past few years. And that's been providing local communities with a reliable source of clean drinking water. A lot of times we're able to fully provide transportable treatment system that uses a reverse osmosis, but pairing that obviously with solar, of course we need batteries to really make the system full. So in this situation, we were able to produce portable water based on Australian drinking water guidelines, and it was capable of operating completely off grid and also simultaneously with the grid connection. And this solution happened to be, again, very scalable and modular in design, but it was standard unit produces up to about 28 kiloliters a day. So low maintenance, and all consumers are easily replaced in the field. And it was factory tested before delivery. So these are pop-up situations that can really make a dramatic difference and improvement to communities. And drinking water, as we all know, is incredibly important. So there's a wide variety after looking at a few of these case studies and deployments for commercial uses, remote locations, and urbanly dense situations as well, using small yet powerful batteries with a safe, reliable, and cost-effective chemistry. So let's relate this all to the customers, right? Safety, reliability, cost. Topics that always come up every single time, right? So for safety, we're looking again, thermal runaway, they're non-toxic, we can recycle them, and there's no maintenance. Really straightforward. Those 4 things will get you through a conversation really simply and straight to the point, so the customer feels good about their decision at the end of the day, whether at their home or at their business. The reliability, let's talk about the easiness to install, because that's first and foremost. You guys are boots on the ground, your trucks and ladders are out. It's not going to turn into a science project when you're on site. And that's one of the best feedbacks we get, is how simple it is to install. And beyond that, when we're looking at warranties and evaluating those warranties based on all the options and varieties of batteries that you have these days, always compare what the spec sheet says to what actually that warranty supports. It's a big difference on the power, big difference in how you're able to install it, potentially what other requirements you need to purchase and install, obviously ventilation, cooling, things of that nature. Because anyone at the end of the day can put what they want on a spec sheet, but what it comes down to, and the peace of mind for your customers, is what's in that warranty, right? And what it's going to provide them safely and reliably. And then something else that's worth mentioning is the efficient use of that available capacity. For example, a simplified battery is 98% efficient. Other batteries out there may be 90 or 85% efficient or less. And so while you might have a larger battery with a lot of kilowatt hours, if you can't use that power efficiently, then you're really not having the same value that's seen on that price sticker, even if it's a little bit less up front. But if it's not going to give you the amount of cycles and cost per kilowatt hour over the lifetime of that battery. And then finally, just because it's the end of the warranty doesn't mean that battery is done. So the end of life battery capacity remaining. Reliability is important with that, because a lot of times we'll factor the cost, and rightfully so, on what we're called the worst case scenario, the warranty ending and the battery being dead. But at the end of those 10 years, for example, with a simplified battery, we're still going to have 80% of that battery life remaining. So that battery is still good to go. And a consideration worth sharing with your customers is understanding what happens at the end of that warranty. Can we still use the battery, or do we have to replace the system? And something I'm just really proud of. We've had some great installers we've got to work with throughout Australia, some great distributors. And we've had 0 failures of deployed batteries in Australia since we began back in early 2016. And it's something that we plan to continue that trend of quality manufacturing and reliable products for your customers, because we know you've built your reputations on good quality work, and we're here to offer you a good quality battery that you can stand behind. So let's talk about cost. It's a topic at the forefront of everybody's mind. And so we take the approach here of what's the true cost of a kilowatt hour? And it boils down to a levelized cost of that energy. And this gives you a more specific way, an effective way to evaluate and compare batteries apples to apples. And so with the LCOE, or levelized cost of energy, works across generating assets and systems in the sense that we're looking at PV system, batteries, solar and storage system, fossil fuel power plants. You know, you can apply this LCOE formula to any of those situations. And so specifically for, you know, the battery, what's the cost of every kilowatt hour I can get out of this system? Now, it looks a little funky at the top with the equation, but it's really simple. It's the cost of that battery divided by the capacity of the cycles and the depth of discharge. And what those ancillary costs are that I mentioned before, right? Because those are those hidden costs not reflected in the price tag typically. So, you know, how much square footage are you taking up? You know, weight, which obviously equates to shipping, since most batteries nowadays are being imported to Australia anyhow. So that, along with what's required to get the equipment to the site or just to install it. I mean, there's some pretty heavy batteries out there. I'm personally not lifting with my back, that's for sure. So are there forklifts required or other, you know, equipment that's going to cost money and time? And then maintenance. I mean, that's the big one, right? Can you rely on that battery? You're going to have your guys out there, your trucks and ladders coming to service that battery 6 months, 2 years, 5 years down the road. It's something, thankfully, we haven't seen with the Simplify batteries, but it's certainly a point of consideration for a variety of other batteries out there that inevitably are going to come back to potentially haunt you. And then one of the more popular things that adds cost is cooling or ventilation, or even the setbacks required depending on where you're installing them. And replacement costs. Obviously, if the performance is not there, they're going to have to replace those batteries sooner than necessary. And when you replace a battery system every 3 years, as opposed to buying the longer lasting system that's going to last 3 times as long, then it's something to factor into that calculator, of course. So one thing I'd like to share with you is anytime you hop on our website, we have a variety of calculators that are going to help you from lead acid bank replacement to a simple system size calculator, all the way to what we just talked about here in an LCOE calculator. And those are all under our support tab in our webpage. So please visit simplifypower.com and you'll be able to have free access to those calculators, which will help bring a great apples to apples comparison, whether we're the right solution or not, based on cost alone. So use those as you see fit. And if you have questions, again, I'll be sharing my contact information. I'd be happy to give any demonstrations as you play with those calculators, those tools in our support system. And this is just a reiteration of that. The tool, again, shows how to look beyond just the upfront costs and really understand how to determine the ROI of those batteries and what that cost of the lifetime of the battery looks like. And again, this is all found on our website. Happy to walk you through it. You can also find it on YouTube as well, with some real world live examples. So with that, I really do appreciate your time, you attending, taking interest in this great topic, because we're all here to bring more security, reliability, and safety to our customers, but also grow our own companies and really make 2021 a fantastic year. We'd love to hear from you as installers, contractors, what's working, what's not working, most importantly, and how we can step in to either educate, improve, or bring a better product to market based on your needs as well. So really appreciate any feedback. My email address is right at the bottom, and I really look forward to working with you all, and happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you again.
And that's me again. What an insightful and content-loaded conference it was. Before I leave you to the expo floor to interact with the exhibitors, just a few words on our upcoming events here at Solar and Storage DigiCon. Join us for our concluding event this Thursday, titled the Tier 1 LATAM, Latin America Solar and Energy Storage Markets Briefing, taking place from 3 p.m. Central European Time. Also, we will start the upcoming year with an exciting roadshow covering key European markets, including Italy, Spain, Poland, Holland, as well as Germany. Moreover, next year, new stops will be on our agenda, such as Vietnam. Stay tuned by our email updates. Wow, a lot of exciting happenings ahead of us. I hope you enjoyed this conference session as much as I did. And as always, it was a sincere pleasure hosting you today. Thank you very much. Stay safe and bye-bye.